Hello again, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. As always, I am your host, Ray Russell, and this week, guys, we dive back in to late, great 1981 and the Georgia territory, headed back to Georgia Championship Wrestling one more time. And in order to do that, you may have recently heard him on John McAdams' Stick to Wrestling, but you've heard him here for the last year and a half, and he's a WrestleCopia staple. I'm talking about Mr. Jammie Ward. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Ray. You know, this is the highlight for me every 3 weeks, sitting down and getting to talk to you for a couple hours.
Yeah, it's always good times talking Georgia Championship Wrestling, just talking wrestling in general. Even when you've popped on the Grenade Show to talk old school WWF, it's always a good time. And your memories of WrestleMania 4 on the boardwalk. So, but we're much further back. We're all the way back in 81. You finally get cable. We talked about that already. You get to watch Georgia, not at your friend's house, but in your own home. You even have great parents who make sure you're there in front of that tube, 605, in the now fall of 1981. As we are closing out the month of September and heading into the month of October, we have a brand new world champion, Nature Boy Ric Flair. We talked about that last time. New Georgia Tag Team Champions. I'm sure you're happy. Michael Hayes, along with Otis Sistrunk. Lots to get into here this week.
Yeah, the only thing would have been better if it would have been Kevin Von Erich, but I still love myself some Otis Sistrunk, and who doesn't?
The Otis era is upon us, guys, so stick with us.
Choo, choo!
We'll be back talking all about the next 2 weeks of Georgia Championship Wrestling after this brief timeout with WrestleCopia's own Gene Jackson.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
All right, there it is, the Retro Wrestling Review podcast with Gene Jackson, currently covering the USWA in 1993. The WWF invasion is upon Gene, and fun times there. Recently interviewed Wolfie D, and he's got a podcast coming up with Dangerous Doug Gilbert as well, but just a fun time in general watching guys like Doink the Clown and the narcissist Lex Luger. Boy, that is surreal. Lex Luger in the WMC TV5 studio.
I'm watching it on YouTube every week, or if I'm not watching it, I'm listening to it on the WrestleCopia podcast network. Gene does an outstanding job.
Yeah, it's a great time. I'm glad Gene, brought that to me. He said, hey, I got an idea. I said, yeah, let's roll with it. And he's just done a fantastic job. It's such a fun show. And it just gets better every week. And I'm looking forward to seeing where we go with heel Vince McMahon right around the corner there in Memphis. But right now, guys, we dive back into 1981 Georgia Championship Wrestling, Jamie. And last we left off, we were closing out the month of September. And we're going to look at some house shows here following the Omni card, New Georgia Tag Team Champions. We'll talk about that in a moment, the reason I bring that up. We kick it off with Augusta, Georgia, September 28th, Bell Auditorium. Brian St. John over Professor Sonoda. Brian Blair defeating Iron Mike Sharpe. It's Crippler, Ray Stevens over George Wells. Tor Kamata downing Steve-O. Then tag team action, going to see the team of Michael Hayes and Mr. Wrestling number 2 over Terry Gordy and Superfly Jimmy Snuka. We're going to revisit that in just a moment, because in the main event of the show, Tommy Rich also defeating the Masked Superstar to capture the national title in a mask versus hair cage match. Tommy Rich, the national champion. Again, more on that later in the program, but we've got a new champion, a hell of a match inside the cage. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about Gordy and Snuka.
Tough night for my 3 faves with Mike Sharpe, George Wells, and Steve-O all going down.
Well, they weren't your top 3 faves. Michael Hayes gets the Duke.
No.
I know you got to be happy about that.
Oh, no, absolutely. And 2, he's up there.
Yeah.
But 4, because Superstar went down too. This is really getting a little tough period right now for me.
It's kind of fun, though. We know Tommy Rich now regains, the Georgia title because it's been engulfed by the national title. So Tommy Rich, once again, a champion. But at the same time, we say goodbye to one Superfly Jimmy Snuka, his final night in the company, teaming with Gordy here, losing to Michael Hayes, who Otis Sistrunk, new champion, couldn't even be bothered to work the quote-unquote B-towns. No Otis here tonight. It's Wrestling 2 and Michael Hayes. I'm sure the fans didn't mind. But, this is the end of the Superfly.
That is sad, and that there'll be no more Superfly, no more incoherent interviews, not knowing whether he's a face or a heel. Most of all, who's going to do the talking with Terry Gordy, with Snuka going? He was like the main mic man. So Gordy's going to have to step up his game without the Superfly on his side.
Yeah, no more Superfly splashes in the TBS studios. No more get well King Curtis brother. None of that stuff. The Superfly gone. And it's really unfortunate because, man, he looks so badass here in this gimmick. Unfortunately, very weird. They send him to the Tri-States, the old McGurk territory, trying to work against the Cowboy and Company in the Mid-South Wrestling promotion, and it just doesn't shake out. It comes to an abrupt halt. Of course, Superfly will go on to bigger things as he moves on to the World Wrestling Federation right around the corner, but still sad to see him go. Superfly, we hardly knew ye. Thanks for giving us a fun summer, though, I got to say.
It was like you just said, badass Jimmy Snuka, and he'll never be in that character again. But at least we got one last version of the badass Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, it was cool times watching him out there with the cowboy hat and the boots on and just kicking some ass, the cool goatee and Jimmy Snuka, everybody. But hey, he's off to the WWF before too long. He's going to do some things with Bob Backlund. He's going to dive off the top of the cage, work with Don Morocco, of course, turning babyface, and just a fun time. Jimmy Snuka ahead. Maybe not for everybody, but we won't get into that here on this program. We will roll on, though. Look at a couple of house shows real quick, run through these. September 29th, Fitzgerald, Georgia. It's Steve-O over Professor Sonoda. Bruno Jr. defeating Ricky Ferreira. Mr. Wrestling 2 going to a draw with Iron Mike Sharpe. That's kind of peculiar.
Yes.
Michael Hayes teaming with Brian Blair in the main event here. Of course, it's just a small town Fitzgerald, so Brian Blair coming to Hayes' rescue as his partner, defeating the team of Mike Sharpe and Professor Sonoda. So very light card, very light on the talent here this week. It looks like about 8 guys here in Fitzgerald.
Yeah, probably a fundraiser for the wrestling team or football team, something like that.
Possible. Could be at the high school. As we go on Thursday, October 1st, Spring City, Tennessee. And this is going to be, no, I don't have any results for this one. I do apologize, guys. But also, October 1st, Marietta, Georgia, Cobb County Civic Center. On that card, Ted Oates over Ken Timms, Jerry Oates defeating Gypsy Joe, Steve-O defeating Iron Mike Sharpe, and Tommy Rich in the main event going to team with Mr. Wrestling 2 over Tor Kamata and the Superstar. As we continue on, one more house show before we get back to TV here this week. October 2nd, Porterdale, Georgia, at the high school. Bruno Jr. over Tony Russo. Brian Blair defeating Professor Sonoda. It's Wrestling 2 over Iron Mike Sharpe. Gotcha this time, Mike. Also in the main event, Terry Gordy now teaming with Tor Kamata, scoring a win over Steve-O and Michael Hayes. So Michael Hayes, makeshift partner every night, and noticeably absent Otis Sistrunk from the entire run.
You think that would have been the time to get Otis some experience under his belt by working these smaller shows and, letting him do all his power moves and stuff. Very surprised. Go ahead. I'll listen to what you're going to say.
No, I'm thinking at this point, they're just trying to talk him into staying around.
You think it's this early that he's getting
Well, he's winning titles and he's not wrestling for the entire week, Jamie. I don't know what else you want me to think.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess he doesn't, his heart's not in it. I mean, I've always heard the story about how somebody threatened him in the locker room, but I think you said you've heard that he just didn't love it and walked away.
Yeah, according to him and other stories that I've heard, his basic synopsis of the whole thing was, I didn't realize how much traveling it would be, which is crazy because it's such a, well, yes, you do have to go up to Ohio, I guess, at this point. At least Columbus, not really everywhere at this point in time. Like once a month, they would hit Columbus and West Virginia on the way back down, but other than that, I mean, you're within one state and it's still too much traveling for Otis here because he's not flying on these jets in the NFL or anything like that. He's not taking these cool buses anymore. Now he's driving himself or he's rolling with whomever from city to city. And I've always heard it just, didn't gel well with what Otis wanted to do post football.
Okay, it makes sense. I guess one too many car rides with Michael Hayes might do that to you.
It might do it. It very well could have been. Or maybe he was rolling with Jimmy Snuka and company. Who knows what was happening there? But Otis is still here right now for the time being, guys. As we move on right now, Jamie, it's time for the October 3rd edition WTBS Studios. It's time for more Georgia Championship Wrestling. And away we go. Host Gordon Soley out here. And right at the top of the program, he's not going to leave us in doubt. We have brand new Georgia Tag Team Champions, says Gordon. Of course, last week at the Omni, it was Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk replacing Kevin Von Erich, defeating Gordy and Snuka for those Georgia Tag titles. But also, we touched on this week already, inside the steel cage, Tommy Rich defeating the Superstar for the National Heavyweight Championship. But more on that later. So, we've got titles changing, top titles changing here in Georgia, and coming right off of a world title change as well.
We know better, but the way this is starting off this week, you'd think there might be a new booker in, but we do know better than that.
Right, absolutely. But it's kind of interesting to see all these titles changing hands, but the talent is here, and they're here to stay, for at least for the time being. We're going to see some new talent coming in as well. Can't wait for that, but not so much here this week on Regional Wrestling, but very soon. Some very intriguing and entertaining talent right around the corner. Jammie Ward's going to be ecstatic, I am sure, as am I. But right now, we talked about it, new world champion in town, and he's here this week. A Nature Boy Ric Flair promo, stepping right in to talk to Gordon at the top of the program. So they talk about the world title win, once again, Ric Flair does, over the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. One match, one time is all it takes to be number one, says the Nature Boy, and Ric Flair now is that number one. Flair says he loves the money that he makes as the world champion. It suits his lifestyle, Jamie, and get used to it. Learn to love it, because the Nature Boy will be here for a long, long time. Woo! So Ric Flair, basically Nostradamus once again, predicting his future.
Yeah, I'm sure he used all these lines on Mid-Atlantic well before this, but you can see the development of the Ric Flair that we're going to see on TBS from 85 on.
Right.
Starting here with the interviews. They're slightly different than what we're going to see later, but for those that haven't seen Mid-Atlantic, it's the beginning of the Nature Boy.
And what separates it here for me is, yeah, you can talk the talk, but now he's walking the walk. He's the world champion saying this. So now you have to take notice. It's not just lip service. He's the world champion telling you that it's going to be this way for a long time.
Yeah, and it is going to be a long time.
Amen to that. As we continue on tag team action, how about this right out of the gate? Ted and Jerry Oates, the Oates brothers in here taking on Jose Medina and Izzy Slapowitz.
Isidore Slapowitz.
Isidore, okay. Well, we're on good first name basis, so he's Izzy to me.
But I loved it when Gordon said Isidore.
Isidore Slapowitz. Well, his last name's Slapowitz. You can't really take it very seriously, right?
No, but still, just hearing Gordon say it, that was great.
Good stuff. So the Oates brothers, they try some cute blind tag spots early on here, but the ring is just too small to pull it off properly. So it wasn't a complete disaster. They knew what they were doing, but just not enough room to really get it done perfectly. As we learn that Ted Oates has been away a little bit for a knee surgery. Apparently he had some type of an injury, and he was taken care of by, get this, Dr. James Andrews. Man, how old was that guy?
Yeah, I caught that too, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to have to look this up, exactly how long Dr. James Andrews has been around, because I could have swore I just saw years on some athlete.
Yeah, it hasn't been super long since I saw his name in the reading of somebody's surgery. I mean, it's probably been a few years, but not super long, and it's just unbelievable to see it goes all the way back to the turn of the 70s into the 1980s here.
Yeah, but that's not the only thing Jerry Oates had done. Did you check out Jerry Oates' new perm?
Yeah, Jerry Oates coming back with a nice looking do.
Yeah, he used to have a straight hair combed to the side, but he went full perm this time around.
Yeah, it threw me off for a moment.
New knee, new hair. Jerry's looking good.
I kind of wish he would go back, to be honest with you guys. But the Oates brothers in firm control here, mostly groundwork, though. But they get aggressive at the end. Double back suplex behind the referee's back by the babyface Oates boys. And Jerry locks in that spinning toe hold on Izzy. Going to get the win 6.5 minutes for the Oates brothers. So they're still relevant. And first time we've seen them, well, I think they closed out last week's episode of TV. But they're prominently featured here at the beginning this week. So they're kind of working the Oates brothers back into the fold.
You know, like you just said, we haven't seen the Oates brothers since June or very early July in that Ted DiBiase workout that they had in the ring that time, prepared when Ted was prepared for Dusty Rhodes. So it's nice to see the Oates back in action. You need that mid-level tag team for the house shows.
Yeah, I can't remember everybody involved in that DiBiase, that training in the ring.
Robert Gibson was in that too.
Both of the Gibsons were in there. That's why I'm wondering. I can't recall if the Oates were in there as well. But yeah, I
Jerry
know.
Was, not
yeah,
Ted.
okay. I remember it's been quite a while since we've seen him on television. Good to see him back. We've talked about it before. Ted Oates has been in a lot of the house show matches, not a lot on TV. But Jerry Oates has been missing in action, and I really simply haven't done my due diligence to go look up if he had been working in other territory or not. Now, I will say, in this matchup, during the commentary, Gordon Solie referred to the injury and the surgery as being Ted. And that's why I said that at the top of that. But it makes more sense that it was Jerry. I thought it would have had to have been Jerry. And I'm going to roll along with you now and pretend like it should have been Jerry. So that's where we're at with that.
Jerry.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it makes sense to me.
Roll.
Again, Jerry hadn't been on TV. So it makes sense to me. As we go on, someone who's been on TV quite a bit, maybe not in the last couple of weeks, but he's coming back to Georgia. As we go off now to a VTR and a promo from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Fans, we're talking with one of the greatest names in NWA wrestling worldwide, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, 2 times world heavyweight champion. What's in store for the American Dream in the future?
Well, the thing that went through Dusty Rhodes' mind for a few days after the world's title no longer belonged to me was how hard I had went for it and how many occasions that I had to get it, and then I had it, and then it was taken away from me. You got to understand that in the Omni now, Ric Flair, who are you fooling? You understand? Who are you kidding? I've seen both sides of your face. I know the devil lives in your heart. I know you run around with pretty women. I know you drive big limousines. And I know you're wearing my belt. But everything that you got, I invented. I am the original. Before it was fashionable, I was the American Dream. Before it was fashionable, I was the rap master. And before it was fashionable, I was the man. So you can come out and talk all you want about any kind of jive you want. Put your other side on. Show them your other face. Remember one thing when you're looking at them lights, Jack, that Dusty Rhodes is the man that made Ric Flair. And Dusty Rhodes wants his title back. And in the Omni, I'm damn sure gonna get it, Jack.
So Dusty, he knows both sides of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, but everything Flair has, the limos, the women, the fortune, the fame. Dusty Rhodes had it first, and Ric Flair, he's in trouble. Dusty invented all of those things. He was the original rap master, was Dusty Rhodes, as he wants his title back, and he's going to get it back at the Omni. As we continue on, Gordon Solie going to interview George Scott, I should say matchmaker George Scott here.
Matchmaker George Scott.
He's in town.
I told you he was still around.
Sure he is. As he's here this week, there's no denying that. He's talking about the injury to Tommy Rich that took place in Augusta during that cage match where Tommy Rich captured the national heavyweight title from the Superstar. We go back in time to the cage match itself. We see a VTR of some of the action. Now it is in black and white, so Gordon Solie tells us to not adjust our TV sets. God, I haven't heard that in a long time, Jamie. As George Scott going to do the voiceover work here. There's about only 4 minutes of the match shown. Superstar going to miss a top rope splash, and Tommy going to make the cover and score the win and gain the title in the process. Then Tommy Rich going for the Superstar's mask. If only he had just left the ring. Instead, the referee goes down as the Great Mephisto, Ray Stevens, and Tor Kamata enter the cage and attack the Wildfire. It becomes a 4-on-1 beatdown from there. The babyface is trying to climb the cage, get over the top, and make the save, but they keep getting knocked down until finally the good guys are successful in getting into that cage, but the heels able to escape the damage already done, and Tommy Rich is stretchered out.
Yeah, but did you notice the one guy that got over the top of the cage to the rescue, and he'd be the guy you wouldn't expect?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, oh, was it Wrestling 2?
Grumpy Grandpa 2 was
wow, I would have said like Steve-O or somebody like that. Wow, Wrestling 2.
Over the 8-foot cage, as Gordon described it as.
Well, he has the most experience in climbing fences, if you will, here in the professional wrestling world. The Rubber Man.
Yes, that's very true.
As we go on, though, we now go off to a VTR following that matchup, following that attack, that beatdown, Tommy Rich getting stretchered out. We go off to an interview with Tommy Rich, who is back home once again in Memphis, Tennessee. We see Tommy walking around the fields, the woods, an old shack. Not sure what's going on here. I'm not sure if he's...
Boy, did this look familiar, right?
It did, didn't it? It was like we've seen this somewhere before. As Gordon promises the innermost thoughts of one Tommy Rich here during this video. I wrote, that's a scary thought, the innermost thoughts of Tommy Rich. But Tommy going to talk all about the recent attacks by the great Mephisto and his men. Rich went home once again to recover, but he made a promise that he would beat the superstar, and beat him he did. Tommy Rich promises he will be back in Atlanta before too long. Rich making a new promise to Mephisto and crew. Wherever he sees them, whether it's in the ring or in the parking lot, he's coming to set them on fire. Wow, that's kind of illegal. Wildfire's revenge, though. Tommy Rich gunning for Great Mephisto and everyone in the gang.
What's amazing about that interview? That interview has stuck in my head all these years. I can still, a year ago, I could have said to you, I could still picture Tommy Rich going, Mephisto, Kamata, Ray Stevens, I'll go get you.
Yeah,
that interview has stayed in my head all these years when he spits out those three names.
Well, the best is yet to come with Tommy Rich here on this episode of Regional Wrestle, at least by my estimation anyway. This segment goes on for quite some time, so we see some of the matchup. We see the footage from the cage match. We hear from the Wildfire who's walking through the fields, and now we cut back to George Scott, who calls out the great Mephisto and his men, Ray Stevens, Tor Kamata, and of course, the Superstar. George Scott has a letter from the NWA president, Jim Crockett, as he informs the heels that all four men have been fined and all are on a 6-month probation. Wow, that's pretty steep. 6 months probation for attacking Tommy Rich. But the Superstar calls the entire thing bunk. That's bunk. And he doesn't like the executive types, like a George Scott.
Harris.
No, not Bunk Harris. We've heard about him before from the Superstar. But Superstar, he doesn't like the executive types like a George Scott. Scott says that he believes the entire thing was a conspiracy set up by the Masked Superstar. Sure, Superstar planned to lose the title and then keep Tommy in the cage to unmask him. Right, whatever you say, Scott. But if Scott had his way, he says the Masked Man would be suspended right now. George Scott then attempts to walk off, but he's grabbed by the Superstar, roughed up, shaken around by Masked Man. He says, and I love this line, I haven't dismissed you yet. Talking to George Scott. What an awesome comment there from the Masked Super. Top heel all day long.
Oh, yeah. That he showed why he's a top heel in that, particular segment.
Yeah, Scott goes to walk away, grabs him by the suit, yanks him back. I'm not done with this conversation. I haven't dismissed you yet. You got to love that. But unfortunately, already being on probation, when Superstar grabbed hold of George Scott, had those comments for him, already being on probation, that did it, Jamie. Scott announces that the Superstar will not be wrestling here today on the program. In fact, the Masked Man is suspended. And after the next 48 hours of fulfilling his commitments, Superstar suspended for the time being. And if Superstar touches Scott again, he will be done with the NWA for good. So the Masked Superstar, not just suspended from Georgia, but suspended supposedly from the entire NWA after this incident.
Yes, well, we know why, because he's going off to Japan. So
right.
It's a good reason to suspend him from the entire, as we will find out in a future segment. He's only suspended in the United States part of the NWA.
Right.
He's not suspended worldwide in the NWA.
Got to keep a little bit of realism, too. I will tell you what, for somebody who really hasn't followed George Scott on the microphone, I thought he did a really good job with the voiceover for the match. I thought he did a good job of explaining everything, and I thought he did okay here. So I'm not mad at him, even though knowing, some of his personal issues and, later on what he does in the NWA. In general, though, I wasn't mad at him.
He was
here.
a former worker. It's not like he never had television time.
Right.
But him and Sandy were multiple tag team champions.
Well, Danny Hodge was a former worker, too, and I just watched him on the UWF TV, and that was not pretty.
Well, Danny Hodge was never known for the microphone.
No, he's just going to break your ankle.
Exactly.
We go on. We go back to the ring now with the superstar suspended. Instead, it's the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, slated to take on Bobby Garrett here. And Garrett rocking that blackjack attire as great mat wrestling early on by Ric Flair. So people say he just does that one match. Well, once upon a time, Ric Flair, he knew how to work beyond that one match. And we see it here as he really schools Bobby Garrett. Gordon Soley going to explain the name of the snapmare here in this match. I learned something new here, Jamie. He says the snapmare was named after Frank Mare. And if true, thank you, Gordon. As the matchup progresses, though, Jamie, Ric Flair becomes more aggressive, goes from that mat wrestling to a vertical suplex, and then locking in that figure four from the wrong side. Going to get the submission win in 4 minutes and 9 seconds. You got to love Gordon, his cover during the suplex spot. I don't know what was really happening. Garrett was all over the place, and he kind of falls forward into the ropes before they recover. Now, Soley claiming that Garrett, he tried to counter the move by pushing off the top rope. So clever for Gordon to cover there as they almost screw up the suplex. As we learn after the matchup, Garrett was injured, potentially a broken arm, says Gordon. So what do? I go back, rewind, guys, and I see the right arm has a brace, but it's actually the left arm that he injures here. So I'm looking at the right arm during the bump when I go back and watch it because it's already injured. There's a brace on it for some reason, but that's not what he injures here. It's going to be his left arm, guys. Go watch this match. He has it around the neck of Ric Flair for the suplex. But as they're coming down, Garrett, he tries to brace his fall for whatever reason, and he lands left arm first on the mat. And then the rest of his body comes down on top of that arm for just a brief second. I wrote nasty. So
this is kind of like watching a football injury during a game. This was pretty gruesome.
Yeah,
when you go back and watch it.
I didn't catch it on first play, but when I went back and watched it, I said, yuck. These are my first thoughts. This is before we find out what happens to him later in the program. I wrote, could be a separated shoulder, possibly, obviously, a broken arm. But after the suplex, I caught for the first time Ric Flair stopping. Did you catch this? After that suplex, Ric Flair stands up, literally stands over top of Garrett, visibly checking on him. And I really wasn't sure why the hell he did that the first time around, but it made a lot more sense watching it again. I see why. But go back and look for yourselves, guys. It's right there on my YouTube. Bobby Garrett, left arm, just laying there. This is so hard to watch. His left arm laying there lifeless, just outward in an unnatural way as we go into that figure four finish. And I hate to break the news to you guys. We're going to have a little more on this later in the program, but Bobby Garrett officially done for 1981. He won't be back until February of 82.
I got a stupid Bobby Garrett fact for you. It may even be a rib.
Okay.
Watching the opening of Georgia Championship Wrestling, one of the, how they have the little boxes and they show all the different wrestlers. Mm-hmm. One of the clips is Bobby Garrett slamming a forearm down on Mr. Wrestling 2. It has to be a rib on 2 to have an enhancement guy show pounding on him.
If I thought Wrestling 2 actually watched the TV program, I'd say, man, I hope they don't have a rematch because he would probably likely take it out on poor Bobby Garrett. But Garrett doesn't have to worry about that, at least not for the rest of 81, because he is done.
No, that's a shame. He is one of my favorite enhancement guys.
He is one of the top enhancement talent here.
I thought if you gave him a good tag team partner, they could have held a regional title somewhere. Maybe not in Georgia, but, maybe Southeast Knoxville. He could have, or even down with Joe Blanchard. They could have definitely gotten him over.
Totally agree. He had enough wherewithal in the ring. I don't know what happened here. I'm not sure why he removed his arm from around Ric Flair's neck mid-suplex. He's been around the business long enough to know not to do that, so I really don't know what happened here. Something went awry, and Bobby Garrett, we'll talk again. We'll cover it later in the program, but he is definitely, not doing too well right now. As we go off, Gordon's solely going to talk with the winner of that match. Here we go with the NWA champion, Ric Flair.
Well, one has to give Bobby Garrett a tremendous amount of credit in trying to block that situation going into that cross-body block. However, Mr. Garrett is injured and will be removed to the hospital. He appears to have broken an arm. I want to take a moment, if I may, to talk to the World Heavyweight Champion, Ric Flair. Obviously, injuries will occur in every sport, and this is something every professional athlete steps into the ring understands full well that these things can happen. And Mr. Flair, certainly, I think this young man was acquitting himself admirably in the ring against you.
Well, I'm not taking anything away from Bobby Garrett. He's an athlete. He's a tremendous wrestler. He wouldn't be part of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Sweetheart, you keep your mouth shut. Ric Flair is the world champion, and Ric Flair does what he has to do to stay the world champion. And I just hope that guys like Rhodes and Rich and Snuka and the Superstar and Stevens and every other big star around here watch and learn. Watch and learn. Woo!
Well, of course, at the Omni in Atlanta, of course, Dusty Rhodes has his long-awaited rematch against you to regain that World Heavyweight Championship.
You think maybe Dusty Rhodes will have an opportunity to see this, Mr. Soley? And I'm not harping on anything, but wrestling's a tough sport. And you got to be a hell of a man. You got to be in condition mentally and physically 120% to be any kind of a champion, much less the world champion. In the Omni, the 18th, Rhodes, you want this, and I want it. The only difference is I've got it, and you got to come to me, brother. Remember, to be the man, to be the Big Daddy, you got to beat the man. In the Omni, the 18th, I don't think so. Big Dust, think about it long and hard. You can break something too, brother, very easily. The Omni, the 18th. Woo!
So Gordon Solie once again doing his due diligence to put over Bobby Garrett, mentioning a possible broken arm after that matchup. And then they talk Dusty Rhodes coming back for his world title. Flair says to be the man, you got to beat him. The man, the nature boy. Big Dust, you can break something too. Be ready. So a little ad-lib there. He broke Bobby Garrett's arm. Dusty, you can break something too. I'm coming for you at the Omni.
Yeah, that should be a hell of a match. Dusty getting his rematch for Flair, taking it almost a month to the day.
Yeah, and it happens in the Omni of all places. They get to advertise the rematch for the world title that Ric Flair just won. And it takes place, cable TV, TBS promoting the big show, and Dusty coming for that rematch that he deserves. And we'll see what happens when we get there. Not too far off. But right now, we're going to hear once again from the great Mephisto, who is without the Masked Superstar. But he has Ray Stevens and Tor Kamata with him. Superstar now suspended, so the planned tag team match that was to take place at the Omni is no more. It was supposed to be here, the Superstar teaming with Stevens to take on Tommy Rich and a partner of his choosing, a mystery partner, if you will. But that's going to change now. With Superstar out, Tor Kamata going to step in to team with the Crippler Ray Stevens, a very odd team, but very effective as we go off to the ring to watch them in action. It is Kamata and Stevens taking on the team of Brian Blair and Steve-O, very capable opponents here. As the heels attack, they get Steve-O in the corner, work him over. We get about 2 minutes of Steve-O taking the beatdown when we see the back door of the studio bust wide open. Well, this didn't take long, Jamie. We saw a VTR earlier from Memphis. Tommy Rich returns to Atlanta. I did not see this coming, at least not this week. Tommy Rich is here, busting open that back door, heading to the ring. Hits the ring, and with the cowboy boot in hand, begins unloading on all of the heels, everybody moving, drawing the disqualification, giving the heels that DQ win. Tommy Rich then going to post Mephisto on the outside before he continues his assault as the crowd goes nuts for the Wildfire's return.
Yeah, that's why Tommy Rich is Mr. George at this point. That crowd just went absolutely crazy. And even I have to admit, he's over more than Michael Hayes is at this point. The people just love Tommy Rich.
I like to make fun when my son, whenever he's binge watching the Attitude Era stuff, I'll make fun. Oh, well, Sable left. Oh, Sable's back. Well, Sable was gone for a week. And I would say, that's the attention span of the late 90s and Vince Russo booking. But think about this. Tommy Rich was on TV last week. Tommy Rich was at the Omni last week. Tommy Rich won the title over the course of this week. He was only gone for about an hour of television, and he makes his quote-unquote return here, and the crowd absolutely eats it up.
Yeah, well, they needed him back.
Clearly. He's got the title.
So Tommy was not about to let Mr. Personality suffer the same fate to his beautiful face as what happened to him. He came back to help Mr. Personality.
He sure did here. I thought he wanted a little revenge for himself, too. I felt like that was why, another reason for his return, as we hear from the Wildfire.
So he had two reasons then.
All
good.
Got to cut a promo here with Gordon Solie after his return.
Gordon, I'm back, brother. Ray Stevens, Mephisto, Kamata, Superstar. Right now, bring your butts out here, because I come back, and I come back to hurt somebody, Gordon. I don't care no more. You know, you take something so far. I went home to them hills in Tennessee, boy. I got my head right. That face ain't healed, but I don't care. Just take it for what it's worth. I come back, and I didn't come back to wrestle. I come back to hurt somebody, and that's a promise. Mephisto, Ray Stevens, Kamata, Superstar. I don't care if it's out in the parking lot at 17, on Peachtree. I don't give a damn. Get him out here, Gordon.
Tommy, I can understand how you feel, my friend.
No, you can't if you ever had your face messed up like this, Gordon. Just like I said, it's probably one of the worst beatings Tommy Rich has ever had in his life. But just remember this. I told you, Superstar, that I was going to get the national title, and I did that. Now I'm telling you something else. I'm going to get you. I'm going to get Ray Stevens. I'm going to get Kamata. I'm going to get every damn one of you.
So Wildfire is back, bandaged nose and all. His face ain't healed yet, but he got his head right. And he's back from Tennessee. Says he's back to hurt somebody, but he don't give a damn. He's going to hurt every damn one of those heels. Double damn. Wow. Cussing twice here on TBS.
My mom was on the edge of the couch for this one because she loved herself some Tommy Rich.
Oh, I thought she was going to scold you for listening to such language, but that's awesome that she was totally into Wildfire.
No, she loved Tommy Rich. She just wanted to give him a haircut, but she loved Tommy Rich.
And I know damn's not like the curse word of all curse words, but it was just kind of odd because we never really hear it ever. And Tommy does it twice here in the matter of 10 seconds.
And then I probably said it about 10 seconds later and got yelled at for it.
Damn! Exactly. As that's going to conclude hour number one. Wildfire Tommy Rich is back as we go off now to the college football scoreboard. Before coming back, exactly, to hour number two, Gordon Solie once again reiterating that the masked superstar has 48 hours to finish up his commitments here, and then he is suspended, not from just Georgia, but the entire NWA, stateside anyway, as we go off to the ring to see the former Georgia Tag Team Champion Terry Gordy taking on Ken Timms one-on-one. So the snooka-less Gordy in there. Sad to see the Superfly gone, but we get Gordy in singles competition, at least this week. Lengthy chinlock segment leads to Gordy pitching Timms to the outside. From there, Terry with an awesome junkyard dog-style crawling headbutt from in the ring to the outside. Ken Timms standing on the outside. Picture this, guys. He's standing there at the apron. Gordy comes crawling over and just levels him with an awesome JYD-style headbutt, knocking heads with Timms. I thought that was really clever, very different, and very cool.
And Terry Gordy was very inventive and wasn't afraid to take moves from other people. And for him, with being a tough guy and having a hard head, it was a perfect move for him to come up with.
I'll tell you what, between this and the UWF, I see something new all the time that I don't ever recall seeing prior. And even though that's kind of basic, I thought it was really cool. It's not a triple Lindy off the top rope or anything that people watch nowadays. But, just for the times, I was just amazed how cool that was. It was just out of nowhere, like an ad-lib spot. But that's what you did, back in the day. You just kind of figured it out as you went. And Ken Timms going to try to come back in the ring, but he runs into a Gordy boot, followed by the pile driver, going to give Terry the win. Match goes 4.5 minutes.
Did you notice that not only did Jerry Oates get a little hair improvement done, So did Terry. He got his hair a little lightened. He was much more blonde this weekend than he had been in previous weeks.
I wonder if somebody came through.
Again, I notice stupid stuff like this.
Well, maybe somebody came through and offered to do the wrestler's hair. Maybe they found a new rat. I don't really know. Hairstylist, perhaps. Maybe Pat Patterson was in town and Louis Dondero was there. I have no idea.
Well, hey, Stevens is there. It's possible Patterson's there.
It's always possible. So remember, guys, Tommy Rich has just arrived back to the studio. So again, we get another Wildfire promo here, as Tommy has apparently just now learned that the superstar has been suspended. Remember, he had just entered the ring, attacked the other heels. He hadn't been alerted until now that the superstar is leaving the territory for the time being. So we get a replay of that VTR from earlier, Superstar's suspension after putting his hands on George Scott. Tommy Rich says that he may only be here for 48 hours, but he's going to get the Masked Man tonight in Jasper, and then perhaps the next day as well. As for his mystery man in the upcoming tag team match, Tommy Rich promises it's going to be a big, bad dude. Could be Stan Hansen, could be Abdullah the Butcher, could be anyone, but they're going to get him.
Oh, yeah. Tommy's going to get him, absolutely. He has one hell of a partner lined up that we'll find out about in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, unfortunately, as soon as he dropped the name Stan Hansen, you almost immediately knew it couldn't be Stan Hansen, and that was an immediate bummer for me.
Right, no Stan, and it's not going to be Abby either if he dropped the name.
Well, we'll know it's not going to be Abby when we get to the next piece of TV, but for a very different reason. We'll talk about that when we get there. As the program goes on, it's Terry Gordy out here with Gordon up next. He lost his tag team titles. He and Snuka did, but Gordy says, I'm only 20 years old. I got time to worry about titles later. Boy, what a comment. He says he wants to talk right now about the implosion of the fabulous Freebirds. Gordy said that he carried the Freebirds. Michael Hayes was jealous because Michael's women would come and talk to Terry when they were hanging out after the matches. But finally, what we've all been waiting for, we learn at the next Omni card, it's going to be one-on-one Terry Gordy taking on his former partner, Michael Hayes. Nobody else out there, one-on-one at the Omni.
Which is surprising. I mean, we're almost 4 months into this feud now, and this is the first time they've had one-on-one at the Omni anyway.
Yeah, and the story went initially, they kind of kept them apart for a few weeks. Then Michael Hayes went through a slew of tag team partners trying to get revenge, from Andre the Giant to Kevin Von Erich to Otis Sistrunk and other names in between. And now it just comes down to the two. One-on-one, Snuka's out with a injury, supposedly. And on the other end, Michael Hayes, Otis is his tag team partner. They're champions right now, I suppose. But it's going to be one-on-one. The feud goes down to this. It all goes down at the Omni on October 18th. More on that as we continue on. Up next, though, we go to a VTR of another talent headed into the Georgia territory, a guy by the name of the Great Kabuki with manager Gary Hart. In this matchup, referee Bronco Lubitsch out there, so this is somewhere in Texas. Kabuki going to do a handicap match against the likes of Carlos Zapata and Jesse Barr. And we're going to see a flying sidekick in the corner as Kabuki scores the win on Zapata. The match goes 5 minutes here. Great Kabuki headed to Georgia.
In all honesty, I'm not looking forward to Kabuki. I didn't like him then. I don't like him 40 years later. He's boring.
As a kid, obviously, you look at The Mist, and The Mist was cool, Jamie, period. I don't care who was spitting it. That was just a cool thing to watch in the 1980s. It was something different, something unique. Of course, the face paint, the nunchuck deal, and even some of the gear that he wore. I enjoyed all of that, but it was more of a spectacle to me, and I was in awe of the Great Kabuki character. I never once said, what a great match that was involving Takachiyo, the Great Kabuki. And, maybe his best years were behind him when he was working on the undercards under his normal name. But, with the Kabuki, I'm totally, on board with you. Watching him in the ring, it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Yeah, I didn't think he was ultra violent except for the chops to the throat. That was about it. Now, if they would have had him slice and dice somebody with those swords that he came in with.
Yeah, the size.
That would have been interesting. Even if you just, rigged him somehow that the guy's already bladed and you hit him with the sword and, makes you bust open.
Yeah, I don't know that this would have canceled you back in 1981, so I could be wrong that you couldn't even pull this off, but I start thinking as you say that, why not take one of those sais, those little swords you're talking about there from Raphael the Ninja Turtle? Why not take one of those and the old Berserker Undertaker thing? Go to stab somebody with it. They move and you stab it into the mat to show you how real and close they came to being impaled, right? And I don't know if you could have got away with that, especially on TBS back in this time frame. And again, I love The Mist, but at the same time, watching Kabuki in the ring, it didn't do a whole lot. So I'm on board with you there.
You know, years later, I actually found it very interesting when I found out how they did The Mist. I would have never thought about it. I mean, I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
Sure, they can Google
that
it for
might not know
themselves.
how it was done. Yeah, Google for yourself. But it's very interesting how you could wrestle a whole match the way that it happens, how The Mist is created, and wrestle a whole match that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, or maybe it's handed off to in some instances, but at the same time, you know, you hear tell of guys like Tully Blanchard who kept the blade in their mouth for the duration of a match, which is just
that
unbelievable.
Exactly. That's another thing I really found amazing, that they would keep a blade in their mouth.
No, you couldn't pay me to do that
for an entire match.
No, thank you.
No, and he wasn't the only one. I've heard of other wrestlers that did that.
That wasn't like a one person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's old
That's
school. Man.
Nuts.
You know what's nuts is this next matchup. What a world we're in. It's Brian St. John still here. Feels like he's been here all year, teaming with Iron Mike Sharpe to take on the likes of Brian Blair and Jeff Sword. And we learn during this matchup, Gordon Soley alerts us that Bobby Garrett, remember that injury that he sustained wrestling Ric Flair? It was a left humerus. The upper bone, the upper arm in the bone is broken. That's a timely update for 1981 to get some information on the same episode of TV as he was rushed to the hospital. Gordon relaying here clearly came over the telephone. So it's good to know Bobby Garrett is not okay, but he is okay. Could have been a lot worse, I suppose. And again, like I said,
my guess is he was very well liked in the locker room. I mean, he was around all year long.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time in Georgia. I'm sure a lot of guys, well, they always enjoyed working guys that made them look good and was competent in the ring, right? And knew their role at the same time. And that was Bobby Garrett, truly, in the Georgia territory anyway. But this is tag team action. You know, we'll move on here, guys. Brian Blair getting worked over early by Sharpe and Brian St. John. Blair, though, finally tags to partner Jeff Sword, who doesn't fare much better. St. John gonna blast Sword with the belly-to-belly suplex. And it's over, just like that. Match goes about 5 minutes, but Mike Sharpe and Brian St. John back together again this week, scoring a win on TV. Just really odd booking all around to see these teams in here.
Yeah, I don't understand the use of Brian Blair in this match. I mean, I would think you'd save a team like Blair and Sword to go up against Kamata and Stevens, or Gordy and Snuka at the time. To go against two guys who are basically just mid-card that you are in the process of phasing out at this point just doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, you could have just had Izzy and Jeff Sword in this match.
So we saw Izzy Slapowitz, we saw Jeff Sword. All we need now is Doug Vines, and the entire Devil's Duo unit will be back together here in Georgia. Rather than
you might get what you're wishing for.
Maybe not this week, though. But you're right. You know, they do protect Brian Blair on the house shows. They utilize him much better than what they're doing right here on TV. But at the same time, I know for a fact it's not much longer before Brian Blair winds up in the Mid-South. So he's not long for the Georgia territory. St. John, though, scoring a win here for his tag team of he and Mike Sharpe. As we go off now, Gordon Soley standing by with the originator of the Fabulous Freebirds. Talking about Michael P.S. Hayes.
There you hear it. The music of the Fabulous Freebirds. And the original Freebird, I'm sure, is on his way to this podium at this time. And you can hear by the excited cheers of the crowd, he is indeed on his way, co-holder of the Georgia Tag Team Championship, the Fabulous Freebird, Michael Hayes.
You know something? I'd like to address something to, you don't mind if I put that down right there? I just like to say something to Mr. Ric Flair. First of all, what is the correct definition of a nature boy? Is that somebody who runs naked through the woods or something? Now, everybody, him and Terry Gordy's out here talking about ladies. Ric Flair says he can snap his finger and have a lady. Baby, any lady that I know, you don't treat her like that. When you want to talk to a lady, you say, hey, baby, why don't you put on some Teddy Pendergrass? Close the door. Let me do what I want to do, because all I want to do is what you want me to.
Yeah, well, all right, let's take a moment now, if I may, to bring this man back to the harsh realities of what's going to happen October 18th at the Omni in Atlanta when you're facing Terry Gordy one-on-one.
One-on-one. It's the thing that I've waited for. You know, this belt, it meant a lot to me. I'd like to thank Otis Sistrunk for what he did. It took a hard fought. They had a different game plan than we thought, but I took the belt just like I said, but it doesn't mean a damn thing to me till I get a hold of you. This is the first title I've ever held, as a matter of fact, a tag team title without Terry. And the only way I could see fit to end this thing that he did to my face and that he did to me, along with what people, you know, a lot of things are going on, what they did to Tommy Rich. I was there. That's uncalled for. But whether it's wintertime, summertime, it's always a hot time in Georgia. And there's going to be a lot of things going down in that Omni. Grudge match or no grudge match. They may think they're going to apply rules to the match, but you can guarantee this, that there ain't going to be no rules, because we're going all out for it.
Tickets are on sale at all seats locations.
So Hayes out here with one half of the tag team titles. So I guess Otis ate one for getting up too early, being here as part of the TV program this week. Michael Hayes says, thank you to Otis Sistrunk for aiding him in winning the Georgia belts, but it doesn't mean a damn thing without getting his hands on Terry Gordy. So good to know we went through all of that, all the hoopla, the big cage match, the I'm leaving the territory if we don't win the titles deal, for Michael Hayes to say it don't mean a thing if I can't get Gordy. And he's going to get his wish. Remember, it's Hayes and Gordy one-on-one upcoming at the Omni in a big grudge match. They call it here the grudge match of the century.
Just another fantastic Michael Hayes promo. Every Michael Hayes promo is a great promo at this point. But yeah, he's finally going to get his hands on Gordy one-on-one. And I guess you're right. I guess Otis didn't feel like getting up and eating some Wheaties to get into the TV studio this morning.
Yeah, I'm sure Michael Hayes would have given him something else to get him here, but Otis just wasn't interested in showing up. He missed the house shows all week, and now he's not even here for TV, but he will return by next week, guys, so you always got that. But we'll see what happens here as the week progresses. Right now, though, we go back to the ring tag team action. Crippler, Ray Stevens, teaming with Tor Kamata. Of course, the Great Mephisto in their corner. They're taking on the likes of Don Gilbert and Denny Brown. Clearly, there's been some issues, Jamie, and you got to really look to notice this. So I don't know how I caught it, but Tor Kamata, the heel, sporting his jacket out here that he's been wearing with that Japanese deity, the god of whatever that is, that laughing Buddha, or whatever you want to call it, that was on his ring jacket. It was on the back of his ring jacket here. The entire picture now blacked out, completely covered. So clearly some calls came in, some people were offended, and Ted Turner, always progressive in shutting down any type of negativity when it comes to races or culture. We know he changed the name of the foreign object to the international object later on in the latter years when he purchases the NWA, because he thought that was too offensive, foreign. They should just be international. And it's kind of odd, though. We saw his ring jacket for weeks now, Tor Kamata sporting that Japanese god on the back of his jacket. And now the shape is still there, but it's colored in black.
See, I didn't catch that. I am really having an effect on you, Ray Russell. You know, I normally catch all this stupid stuff, and here you are catching that. I'm proud of you, my friend.
Yeah, I don't know. It stuck out to me, and I knew for a fact that we were looking at it weeks earlier, and I said, that's kind of peculiar. And then I put two and two together. Well, somebody clearly complained it was offensive to someone and their religion, I would have to imagine, or somebody just wanted to be an asshole. Who knows what the true story was there, but it had to cost a few bucks to have the original picture put on there, but it is what it is, and just something I noticed. As we go off, they score a big win here over the team of Denny Brown and Don Gilbert. Mephisto clutching his arm, selling that shoulder posting from earlier from Tommy Rich. Gordon claiming that Mephisto injured himself during that spot. I do believe that's a work. As I said, the heel's going to go over just all over their opponents here. Denny Brown getting dropped across the top rope, and the heels pick up the win. Match goes 4 minutes and 18 seconds.
Yeah, I actually think Kamata and Stevens are a better team than they are individual wrestlers at this point.
I would have to totally agree. Stevens, long in the tooth. He's up there in age. He needs to be able to tag in and out to kind of save himself for the big spots. Kamata, yeah, he's seen better years as well. He was hell of a talent for a guy his size. You don't believe me, guys? Go look at some of his earlier stuff. Like I said, even in 1980 WWF, coming off the top rope. And I don't mean he climbed up there and he fell off. I mean, he looked good coming off that top rope. So Kamata knew what he was doing, but he could only do it in spurts. Again, Stevens, the same thing by this point in his career, I feel anyway. The better team, Stevens and Superstar. What a great wrestling team that would be. But this works for what it is. For me, I don't think they really gel well. I mean, it's just two polar opposites, but it's territory wrestling. It's a stable, and you get things like this.
Right. In the territory days, anybody could get thrown together.
Yeah. And that was the case here as we go off to a promo now. Gordon Solie going to talk to Great Mephisto and his men, Stevens and Kamata. Mephisto pointing out that they are all on probation, and Superstar, of course, suspended. But Tommy Rich going to show up, injuring Mephisto earlier, and nothing happens to him, Jamie. Good old American justice, says Mephisto. That's what that is. Mephisto, though, doesn't believe Tommy Rich has a mystery partner. Nobody else is dumb enough to step in the ring with the likes of Kamata and Ray Stevens.
Well, they will eventually find out who that person is, and that guy is pretty dumb.
Well, speaking of, I won't go there, but look who finally woke up from his nap and showed up at the TBS studios. As we come to the latter half of the program here, the final half hour of the show, we have a 6-man tag team match scheduled. On one side, the preliminary guys, Jerry Gray, Bob Russell, Deke Rivers. On the other side, it's Steve-O, Michael Hayes, and welcome to the party, Otis Sistrunk, finally here. And you know he wasn't here earlier, or he would have been out here with Michael Hayes. So Otis shows up just in time for the big 6-man.
Maybe he took a wrong turn in Atlanta.
Yeah, made a wrong turn in Albuquerque. So naturally, with the Georgia Tag Team Champions out here, it's going to be Steve-O starting the match. But it isn't long before we get our first look at Otis Sistrunk on TV. Remember, guys, we saw some VTRs of some house shows with those quote-unquote shoulder blocks or whatever you want to call them. But this is Otis's very first match in TBS studios as he lands a few of his double arm blows, I'll call it here, on Bob Russell. I wrote, just not pretty to look at all. Sistrunk going to try to hold Jerry Gray for Steve-O to take advantage, but your guy, Mr. Personality, shakes his head. No, we don't cheat here, Otis. Steve-O wants to fight fair. I wrote, super lame, Jamie.
That's truth, justice in the American way right there. I mean, look at this. Steve-O is the best worker in this match. How scary is that? And you know I love Steve-O.
Very true. Very, very true. I thought it was hilarious. Otis, he hasn't picked up on much of anything, right? He looks very awkward, to be polite, in the ring. His offense is just atrocious, as we'll continue to see here. But the one thing he picks up is, hey, I'll hold this guy so that my partner can take a shot. And Steve-O shuts that down. No, I'm a super good guy. I will not do that, Otis Sistrunk. You release that man right now at once so I can wrestle him fair and square, Mr. Personality Steve-O.
I wonder what Michael Hayes was saying to himself at this point.
I'm sure he was already clocked out before this thing even started. As Otis going to tag back into the matchup, sloppy forearms, and quite possibly the worst whip into the ropes I've ever seen. Ever.
I'll second that.
Yeah, think about that for a minute. I've seen some bad ones, Jamie. This really took the cake for me. If you guys go back and check this 6-man, I really encourage anybody, if you just want to have a laugh, if you just want to see the worst whip into the ropes in the history of wrestling, go check this one out, because he just kind of, pushes the guy as he delivers a headbutt and a body slam, probably the most wrestling-related move I see Otis do here. We go from a really awkward Irish whip, if that's what you want to call it, to a push. He pushes Jerry Gray down, and then, my God, it happens. I talked about the worst whip in the history of wrestling. This may be the worst clothesline I have ever seen in the history of wrestling, ever. And I'm not saying that because I'm on a podcast here, Jamie. I'm not saying that because I'm trying to be funny or I'm trying to sell this episode of TV. I truly mean the clothesline here. He was a football player. He has to know how to throw a damn clothesline. And this is just the worst thing I've ever seen.
He played with Ben Davidson, the king of the clothesline.
Yes, before they had to ban it.
Right, so he should know how to actually do one.
Yeah, this was not pretty. His arm very limp, kind of hung down as he delivered it, and just nothing good about this match until Michael Hayes. You talked about Steve-O being the best worker in the match. Michael Hayes has to come in and save the day. Think about that for a minute. Delivering the pile driver to put us all out of our misery of Otis Sistrunk. Hayes scoring the win on Bob Russell. Match goes 4.5 minutes. Unbelievable. Go watch this, guys.
Oh, yeah, and notice Michael Hayes' trunks. The trunks are a little bit different.
Yeah, they were very unusual.
Freebird trunks on.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he found these. To put them back. As we've got one more match here this week on Georgia TV. Tag team action. Going to see Wrestling 2. Teaming with George Wells. Our first look at him this week. Taking on the team of Rick Link. And a big fellow in black is his name. It's actually a guy by the name of Billy Joe Good in a full-body Assassins-type black bodysuit. Best way I can describe him. Billy Joe Good and Rick Link out here. Two big boys taking on George Wells in Wrestling 2. Wells lands a nice drop kick, and he power slams Good. Very impressive, Wells, as the biggins get in their shots, but the baby faces control throughout. Knee lift on Good from Wrestling 2, and then George Wells in with a shoulder tackle on Rick Link, tagging back to 2, who comes in to deliver that cross arm breaker, scoring the submission win for the baby faces. Match goes 4 minutes and 56 seconds to end the show.
Yeah, 2's still using that arm breaker, even though his title shot with Ric Flair's over.
Well, once you start utilizing it, why give it up? I mean, it was working, right? So I didn't mind it. And of course, 2 going to go over here because George Wells not long for the company.
Well, and once again, George Wells, it's a shame. He was just totally wasted in this 4 or 5 month run that he had. I mean, him and Reed got their early push, but the guy is so talented. He should have been much more than he was.
Totally agree. As Georgia Championship Wrestling comes to a conclusion this week, we head off now to Nashville Alive. Do you remember Nashville Alive? They replaced your buddy. I can't remember his name now.
My mom and dad would stay on and watch Nashville Alive after wrestling was over.
What was the program that used to come on after this, the comedy show that you were talking about earlier in the year? I can't remember the name of the show now.
Tush?
Tush, that's it. Bill Tush, was it?
Yeah, Bill Tush, yes.
Okay. Now he's being replaced by Nashville Alive guys. As
Turner's moving on to bigger and better things, but Tush is still on Sundays at this point.
Okay. All right. So he's still hanging around. Very cool to know. I love it. As we're going to take a quick WrestleCopia timeout, guys. When we return, we're going to talk another week of Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jammie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Rasslin. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com youtube.com/WrestlingGrenade, and why not subscribe to youtube.com/WrestlingGrenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all-access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon-exclusive Watch-Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, Videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon-exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
All right, Jamie, we be back as we continue on here with the Georgia Championship Wrestling project on the Regional Wrestling Podcast. We are now in the month of October, guys, and we head off to a house show in Carrollton, Georgia at the Fairgrounds, October 3rd. Bruno Sammartino Jr. over Gypsy Joe. Big Red in town. How about that?
Big Red is
Big
back.
Red.
We haven't seen him since like March.
He defeats Professor Sonoda here. It's Steve-O over Brian St. John. And Terry Gordy teaming with Tor Kamata. That's a hell of a team. Going to a double disqualification with Michael Hayes and Brian Blair. What an odd choice of a partner in that matchup. As also October 3rd, Jasper, Georgia at the Pickens County High School. Iron Mike Sharpe teaming with the Angel, taking on the team of Ted and Jerry Oates. Oh, by the way, guys, no results for the Jasper card, but it is Brian Blair also on this card, originally scheduled to take on Rick Ferreira. Not sure if he's on both shows or not. Then from there, Ray the Crippler Stevens was supposed to go one-on-one with Mr. Wrestling 2. Now, the ad just says Ray on it. I have to believe that was Ray Stevens taking on Wrestling 2, which in its heyday could have been a hell of a one-on-one match. And we do know in the main event, with Superstar leaving the territory briefly, Wildfire Tommy Rich, the new national champion, defeating the Masked Man.
Yeah, continuing his commitments.
For the time. He's only
Which was nice of the matchmaker, George Scott, to allow
2 days. Gave him 2
48
days.
hours to make the show.
What an odd amount of time.
Extra pay going out the door.
You're not suspended today. You've got 2 days to fulfill your commitment. So anything dastardly you want to do before you're suspended indefinitely, have at it. It's not exactly the wisest decision by a guy in power, but okay.
But I'll give you something similar to this. Flash forward to Christmas night, 1983. DiBiase pins Tommy Rich in a loser leaves town match.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following Saturday, Tommy Rich wrestles a TV match because all he says that he gets to finish his commitments out. for another week or so yet before he has to leave Georgia.
They would do that for years. We saw that with Ric Flair finishing his commitments up in New York when he left after the Mr. Perfect match on Raw. Continued to work the house shows for another week. They even said so at the end of that Raw, so everybody would still buy the tickets and come to those house shows.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so I get it. I get where they're going with this. It just seems so odd that they give him 2 days, not a week. Oh, you got 2 days, Superstar, before you head off to New Japan, a.k.a. you're suspended. As we see the Superstar in his final matchup before he leaves for the time being, October 4th, Gainesville, Georgia Mountain Center. Brian Blair going to a draw with Brian St. John. Bruno Jr. over French Angel. Mike Sharpe going to a draw with George Wells. Not a pretty card, guys. But 6-man tag team action in the main event. Going to see Ray Stevens, Tor Kamata, and the Masked Superstar defeat Mr. Wrestling 2, Steve-O, and Tommy Rich on a disqualification, and Superstar finishing up for now anyway.
You know, Superstar and 2, they could go in there blindfolded and be able to work with each other.
Oh, no doubt about it. What a great feud that was, man. I'd love to go back and watch that again. See, it's been a long time since I really covered that. I need to go back and check that stuff out. Those guys were fun in that feud between the Masked Men, Superstar and Wrestling 2. But you're right, they could phone that in and still be pretty solid between those two guys. But we had 6 guys out there working, including Steve-O. So I'm sure it was great. Disqualification. And the heels go over, so you have to think Tommy Rich lost it.
Very possible. That would kind of make sense. He just goes off on Superstar and the referee's trying to pull him off and he winds up throwing the referee.
Well, I certainly hope Steve-O is not his mystery partner heading into the Omni, or the crowd is going to be very let down. Going to run across a couple more cards here real quickly, guys. Augusta, Georgia, October 5th, Bell Auditorium, Steve-O over the French Angel, Bruno Jr. defeating Rick Ferreira, Otis Sistrunk. How about that? Working a house show, scoring a singles win.
Isn't he from Augusta?
Is he? I have no idea.
I know he was from Georgia somewhere.
Well, he didn't have to drive too far.
Augusta. Yeah, right.
So
there's no Uber to get him there back then.
Well, this is a scary thought. Otis Sistrunk defeats Brian St. John in a singles match. Somebody let Otis go out there and work a singles match all by his lonesome. I didn't even see this, and I'm sitting here going, poor Brian St. John.
Well, I guess they had a lot of faith Brian St. John can walk him through it.
I can only hope that match
thing or two.
went about 2 minutes. That's all I can say. But that wasn't even it. You know, Otis Sistrunk, that's the undercard, guys. Also on the card, one-on-one, heading into the Omni, we're going to see it here in Augusta first. Terry Gordy defeating Michael P.S. Hayes. And in the main event, Tommy Rich teaming with Wrestling 2, going to a double disqualification with Ray Stevens and Tor Kamata. So I'm not going to say practicing, that's silly, practicing matches for the Omni, but certainly getting their shtick in, kind of figuring some things out before they head off to the Omni. Tommy Rich and these matches with Kamata and Stevens, but also Gordy and Hayes one-on-one. No real reason to do it here before they get to the Omni, unless it's these two trying to figure out some fun spots.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, having Gordy and Hayes work together before they get to the Omni one-on-one, because I don't ever remember seeing any of the results of those two guys. And I'm sure Tommy Rich hasn't really ever worked with Stevens and Kamata much in the past.
Well, there's not really much to learn working with Tor Kamata.
Yeah, but still, I mean, he's unfamiliar with working with either guy. So
sure.
You know, get some practice in before you get to the Omni.
We go on October 6th, Macon, Georgia at the Coliseum. Brian Blair defeating Professor Sonoda. Steve-O over Iron Mike Sharpe. George Wells battling Brian St. John to a draw. Ray the Crippler Stevens defeating Mr. Wrestling 2. And the main event tag team action, Tommy Rich and Michael Hayes over Terry Gordy and Tor Kamata on a disqualification. And I got to go back and look. We saw Otis Sistrunk on the last show. Not so much this time around. So you may be onto something. Maybe he was home and he decided he'd come out and work that one match, because that is the only, we saw him in the second hour, the closing moments of the second hour of Georgia TV, but he hasn't been on a house show other than the prior. So no Otis here in Macon, but another big main event, Rich teaming with Hayes and a couple of their foes on the other side in Gordy and Kamata.
That's a beefy team, Gordy and Kamata together.
Yeah. That's a dangerous duo, no doubt about it. As we continue on another house show here, Columbus, Georgia, Memorial Auditorium, October 7th. Bruno Jr. over Rick Ferreira. George Wells defeating Professor Sonoda. It's Brian Blair over Brian St. John. Tommy Rich battling Tor Kamata to a no contest. And here he is, Otis Sistrunk, showing up to team with Michael Hayes, Georgia Tag Team Champions, in full force here, defeating Terry Gordy and Ray the Crippler Stevens. by a DQ. You look at that team on paper, Stevens and Gordy, and go, oh man. But of course, Stevens passed his prime, so maybe not as pretty as you might imagine, but at the same time, boy, in their primes, that would have been something.
Yeah, but Stevens, even though he's not, in their prime, imagine that team going around the country, going territory to territory.
Yeah. As we've got a few more house shows, no results, no matches here, but I just wanted to point out the cities and the dates here. Thursday, a couple of shows in Anniston, Alabama, and Waycross, Georgia at the City Auditorium. Then Friday, October 9th, in Douglas, Georgia at the Bryant Street Gym. Probably not the most stacked card there in Douglas, Georgia. So we'll move on to the next weekend of TV. Back to the studios, TBS studios. More Georgia Championship Wrestling for October 10th. Gordon Soley, of course, your host, as we kick things off with a promo from a suit-wearing Terry Gordy.
And as you can see, Terry Gordy has joined me. He and Superfly Snook are the former Georgia Tag Team Champions. That title is currently held by Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk.
Well, that's right, Soley. You know, there's a whole lot of excitement happening over the Georgia area. And it's like this. Anytime the kids in town, you know there's going to be excitement going down. But, you know, I got a good friend, Gordon Soley. He's been gone for a few weeks. And he likes to cause a little excitement himself. And I'm sure all y'all people out there remember his name. It's Big Jim Duggan. And that is Duggan. That's not Dugan. And Duggan is coming back to the area to cause a little pandemonium, because he likes to cause pandemonium just like myself. Duggan has been taking a little tour. He's been all around the world. He's been to Japan, Puerto Rico, Dominica. If there's a Rica, he's been there too, Gordon.
Well, indeed, Big Jim Duggan, who will be returning very shortly, obviously, here to the Georgia Championship Wrestling scene. And I assume now that Snook is gone that you're going to take him on.
Well, that's right. No, Soley, Snook is going to be back. Snook is off with an injury right now. You know, in any sport you can have an injury. It's just nothing to worry about, nothing to get upset over. He will be back. Snook is looking forward to coming back, and he's going to cause a little pandemonium too. You know, Gordon Soley, now these are the type of people that I like to hang with. It's not Michael Hayes. I don't like to hang with people like that, such as Michael Hayes, you know, who gets out here and he wants to insult everybody on the TV and everything. Well, Michael Hayes, you can go on and you can insult me all you want to, boy, but that's all you can do.
Well, obviously, of course, Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk, the new Georgia Tag Team Champions, having defeated this man, Terry Gordy, and Superfly Jim Snuka for that title. And naturally, I can understand why you would like to regain that championship, be it with Big Jim Duggan or whether it's Superfly Snuka.
Well, it's like this. What's this? Now, you know, I was standing back in the monitor room, and I was listening to you shoot off your mouth, and I can't believe how much on this television you look like a big baby. So what I did is I found something back there that I thought I might give you. You see this little bonnet here, little cute baby bonnet? I thought that might look real good upside of that fat face of yours out here. Let me tell you something, boy. I bet you wish you was man enough to put it on me.
Hold on, gentlemen.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
We'll be back in just a moment. Let's go to a commercial here.
Wow, how about that? Terry Gordy in a suit announces that Big Jim Duggan, that's not Dugan, it's Duggan, on his way back to Georgia Championship Wrestling. That had to be something that Terry volunteered to do himself. There's no other reason for Gordy to mention that his good buddy, Jim Duggan, is headed back to town.
And do the stick with him saying his name's not Dugan.
Yes.
It's Duggan.
It's Duggan. 2 G's, tough guy. Is Terry going to claim that Superfly Snuka is injured, but promises that he'll be back too? Spoiler alert, guys. Not going to happen. Michael Hayes, though, interrupts the promo with Terry Gordy there, and he brings with him a baby bonnet, says that he could shove baby Huey Gordy in that bonnet. Terry then getting pissed, and shouting begins between the two men. Gordy saying that Hayes isn't man enough to put that bonnet on him. Heated words are exchanged there as Gordon has to send us into a commercial break. And when we return, Jamie, we see an enraged Gordy holding the bonnet and apparently a baby bottle that Hayes brought out there as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but Really great promo here from Terry Gordy, and I still have no idea why he was wearing a suit.
Because he wants to be like Ray Stevens. Stevens has been out there the last couple of weeks in a suit. Maybe it's rubbing off on Terry a little bit.
You think it's rubbing off?
It was a good look for him for a change.
Yeah, Terry Gordy looked pretty cool out there in a suit. Michael Hayes out there in his own version of a suit, if you will, and he confronts Gordy, and we're going to hear a little bit more about what took place during the commercial break. But before we do that, we go off to the ring tag team action. Brian Blair here this week with a better partner than Jeff Sword. This week, Blair teaming with Bruno Sammartino Jr. Their opponents, Don Gilbert and Jose Medina, as David Sammartino slowly growing that gut. A little bit of baby fat growing here, but using his power while Brian Blair using his technical abilities on the mat. Brian Blair with a catapult at one point, sending Gilbert into the corner, as the prelim team does manage to take over on Blair, surprising for a bit of time. I couldn't believe they let it go that long. The heel team, if you will, the preliminary guys, beating up on Brian Blair until Blair finally able to tag back to Bruno Jr., who hits a jumping knee to Don Gilbert and then a body toss, Kim Patera style, picking him up in the air and launching him across the ring. But Sammartino with a sloppy reverse rolling cradle barely gets himself a 2 count. Brian Blair back in, clearly goes for the banana split, but Medina clearly fucks it up, has no idea what the hell Blair's trying to go for. So, take 2. This time, Brian Blair locking in the abdominal stretch of doom and then rocking it back into another cradle to get the 1, 2, 3. Match goes nearly 7.5 minutes.
Yeah, for as bad as Medina looks in this match, I've never seen Don Gilbert look this good. I thought he sold very well, and he got some nice little offense in there.
Yeah, when they gave them offense, I was really stunned that Gilbert kind of knew what to do in there, because he's just not one of those guys that we're used to seeing get any offense in. But you're right, Medina very much, and he's been here quite a while, no excuse. He had no idea what Brian Blair was doing out there. And, these are basic technical moves.
He hasn't looked that bad during his run here, but he was horrible in this match.
Yeah, not pretty at all was Jose Medina, but the right team went over. The babyfaces scoring the win. And then we go back to Gordon Soley, who goes back to earlier. Remember that confrontation between Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes going into the commercial break? We now get a clip of what happened during the break. As we see, he's here again, Jamie, Otis Sistrunk out here, sneaking up behind Terry Gordy, holding Terry from behind long enough for Michael Hayes to stick the baby bonnet on the head of Gordy, and then, oh man, shove a baby bottle into Gordy's mouth.
Yeah, great angle. It's definitely one of the best ones in Georgia's history, and especially with this feud. The way this feud should have ended was a match with Hayes' hair against Gordy getting put into a diaper with a baby bonnet and baby bottle in his mouth. That's how this feud should have ended. But yeah, great angle.
Yeah, like we talked about that weeks ago here on the program. I would have loved to have seen a crybaby type match where he got the diaper and the whole 9 yards. Would have been an awesome, fun matchup. And of course, the crowd would have ate up the finish there if Gordy had lost and Hayes knocked him out and had to put a diaper on, whatever the case may have been. And Terry Gordy, I mean, if they were leaving the territory, Gordy could even have worked in a few tears, right? Like, just humiliation tears right. I'm talking about. That would have been
very interesting here also that they filmed what happened during the commercial break, but they didn't go to it right away. They waited for a match and then went back.
Yes.
Most times when something like that happens, they'll have a match in a ring and they'll say, oh, we're going to commercial break. If anything happens, the cameras are still rolling. And every now and then you had something. I think going back to the Buck Robley attack on Tommy Rich was one of those delayed instances. So very, very interesting. You went to a match before you came back to what happened.
So, the unthinkable happens here, and Gordy gets a baby bottle shoved in his mouth. The ultimate humiliation aired here on television now. Took place during the commercial, but Gordon making sure to show it to the fans nationwide, and that's going to bring out Terry Gordy.
They put a baby bonnet on him, and they shoved a baby bottle in his mouth. Wow.
Well, that's what happened that those of you at home did not get an opportunity to see as Terry Gordy came out.
Wait just a second, Gordon. Sorry, I don't appreciate it one little bit. You showing this film back on Nationwide TV. I don't appreciate being treated like this, Gordon Soley. I'm a professional athlete, and I want to be treated like a professional athlete. It's like this, Gordon Solie. Michael's been going around here and calling me names and calling me everything for a long time now, and I'm getting good and tired of it. You know, it's like this, Michael Hayes. I don't know if you're anywhere back there listening or not, boy, but I got something to tell you, and I want you to clean your ears out and clean them out good, boy. It's like this. I bet you can't. I bet he ain't man enough, Gordon Solie. I bet he ain't man enough to take this bottle and take this body and stick it in my mouth himself, you know. Gordon Solie, if I could only get my hands on him right now, I would beat him like a red-headed stepchild because Michael Hayes, I hate ever gut your body, boy. And one day, Michael Hayes, I'm going to pay you back, boy, because you know I did a lot of things for you. I brought you out of the slums of Pensacola, Florida, and made you what you are today. So, Michael Hayes, you know, it's like this, Gordon Solie. You just don't do something like this and embarrass me on nationwide TV and think for 1 second that you're going to get away with it. Because, Michael Hayes, if it takes everything I got, boy, I'm going to beat every brain in your body out.
So Gordy is one angry fellow, Jamie. He says that Michael Hayes ain't man enough to put that bottle in his mouth all by himself. Remember, it was Sistrunk aiding Hayes and doing that during that commercial break. He says Michael Hayes will be paid back at the Omni. And Terry Gordy, I do believe, does mean it. He is upset.
Oh, yeah, he is ticked at this one. And then did you catch Gordon's, as Gordy walks away, like a little side comment, like about him being a baby Huey or something like that? Well, at the very end. Gordon sneaks something in there at the end.
Yeah, I didn't put it in my notes, but there's a promo here with Gordy somewhere where Gordon refers to him twice as baby Hugh. I mean, Terry Gordy. So Gordon having some fun with this on his own. He's going rogue with this baby Huey deal.
Well, he's Gordon. He can do that.
I was going to say he hates when anybody else does things like that, but I guess, like you said, it's Gordon Solie. So, we can do that, brother.
It's Gordon's show. Just remember that. Everybody else just happens to be on it.
Well, we saw Bruno Jr., we saw Brian Blair, the trifecta of personality here this week. As up next, singles action involving your man, Steve-O, taking on Professor Sonoda. And your typical back-and-forth matchup here. Lots of competition from Sonoda, but Sonoda finally gaining control of the match briefly, but Steve-O locking in that sleeper hold that he learned in Japan. Sonoda, though, able to break the sleeper, driving O back to the corner, and let the martial arts chops begin, Jamie. Chopso-Rama. As Steve-O bouncing back, though, with a savate kick of sorts and his own series of chops. Now, these are Steve-O style chops, so look out, fellas. As a double thrust chop from Steve-O, going to get a 2 count on Sonoda, and then a drop kick, and Steve-O going to the top rope, standing there like he's Ricky fucking Steamboat to deliver that top rope crossbody block. Steve-O scoring the win, 7 minutes and 36 seconds.
This was his audition to become the Ninja, the AWA 6 years later. I think we touched on that last week, but you know, Vern had to see this match and then had it in the back of that mind all those years until he needed a Ninja. And that's why he called on Steve-O.
Yeah, he didn't just climb to the top rope either. He got up there and just stood there like he was like it just had reminiscent of Ricky's Steamboat.
He looked great in this match.
It was an okay match. I'm not going to say he looked great.
For Steve-O, he looked
okay.
great. How's that
all right,
sound?
well, I'll take that.
So not only is the personality developing, but the in-ring stuff is developing. He's really starting to hit a high point now.
If you say so. Gordon up next going to talk with the Wildfire Tommy Rich. But this week, Jamie, he's not alone. Tommy Rich bringing with him a box. You heard me right. Tommy Rich out here with a box. Because everything's more over when it comes out of a box, Jamie.
Yeah, this is the first time in my life I'd ever seen this angle. And I really liked it. They're going to do it like 2 years later again on Georgia and multiple shows going forward. But this was the first time I'd ever seen it, and I really enjoyed this angle.
Well, Wildfire out here saying that, yes, he has his issues with Great Mephisto and his men, but now he has a box in his corner for security. You have to take this seriously. Tommy Rich going to knock on the box, and the box going to knock right back.
I wonder who could be in there this week. Whether
Freddie Miller?
It could be Freddie Miller now. I kind of doubt the guy that we're going to find out who's in the box was in the box.
Definitely
for
not.
This one.
And this is why I said we know it can't be Abdullah the Butcher, because there's no way Abby could fit in this box.
No, or Tor Kamata couldn't even fit in that box.
Actually,
if you really wanted to get embedded.
I'll take it a step further. I should say boxes, because what this is, it appears to be several boxes stacked high, 6 feet high, and they're all taped together. This is the most bootleg. At least, I give Memphis crap all the time. We make fun of Memphis, me and Gene Jackson there in 85 in the Memphis territory here on Regional Rasslin. But at least when somebody came out of a box over there, they actually had the sense to bring out a fucking crate. And here, this is literally cardboard boxes taped together.
Yeah, and you can tell because it has the lip, the fold down lip on it.
Yeah.
It's not like it was a refrigerator box that they cut in half.
No,
and
multiple
then
boxes.
It. Yeah,
yes.
It's multiple boxes that they taped together.
It makes me feel like they didn't come up with this idea until they got to the studio that day.
Very possible, and they just grabbed that from, one of the rooms. CNN was just opening up around that time, so maybe it was from some furniture for CNN, and they just flopped it together.
Well, I'll tell you what, for as silly as that promo was with Tommy Rich and said box, we go off now to a VTR. Gordon Solie called to a hotel room to have a meeting with the masked superstar.
Came here at your request, but there's not a thing that I can do for you.
Gordon, I don't want you to do a thing for me. All I want you to do is, because I know that Tommy Rich respects you a great deal, and I've respected you in the past, I want you to take back a message, and this is directed to you, Tommy Rich. You have cost me a great deal of money, an indefinite suspension. For the past 5 days, I've received phone calls from promoters around this country canceling out my matches. And I haven't been able to contact anybody who will give me a match. Tommy Rich, we're talking about a great deal of money. I want you to take a look at this, Gordon. I want you to take a good look at this, and I want you to take the message back to Tommy Rich. Because right here is money that I am willing to pay, and there's a great deal more where that came from. I am willing to pay these three gentlemen as an insurance policy. I may be out of wrestling indefinitely, but Tommy Rich, you are a marked man. These gentlemen and I have been in a meeting, and they have assured me that Tommy Rich's time is very, very limited. Tommy Rich, I want you to realize we're not playing games any longer. We're not playing tiddlywinks. We're very serious. George Scott can't do anything to me. The president of the NWA can't do anything to me because I've already been suspended. They made me a promise that they're going to get rid of you.
You know what, superstar? Tommy Rich is as good as gone.
We're professionals. No matter where the money comes from, this will make the job well done, and I assure you, Mr. Superstar, the job will be done.
I can see here 10 or possibly $11,000, $12,000.
There's a great deal more where that come from, Gordon. Don't you worry about it. But Tommy, you better begin to worry, and I mean today.
So there we saw it there. If you guys go watch the television program, Gordon Solie brought to a hotel room, and seated there is the superstar alongside Gordon, the cameraman, of course. And behind the superstar, it's Mephisto, Kamata, who looks odd in a hotel, but where else is he going to sleep? And Ray Stevens there as well. And Superstar, he says that Tommy Rich has cost him a lot of money, an indefinite suspension, as the NWA promoters have all band together to continue to cancel the Superstar's matches nationwide here in the States. The masked man then opens a briefcase filled with money, or at least kind of filled with money, as he states that he is now placing a bounty on the head of Tommy Rich, second time this year. My God, what a wanted man. Ray Stevens says that Tommy Rich is as good as gone.
As you were just saying, for as corny and minor league the previous segment was,
yes,
this is the opposite. This is major league. This is great. You know it's a serious thing because now while Superstar doesn't have the suit and tie, he does have the dress shirt.
Mm-hmm.
and the sports jacket on. Stevens is in suit and tie. Mephisto's in suit and tie. And you can't explain anything that Tor Kamata does. But it's a very serious segment, complete with Superstar kind of getting a little perturbed with Gordon Soley at one point of this interview. And then he starts laying the $100 bills out. And he said, there's at least $10,000. Could be $11,000 or $12,000.
I don't know. Yeah. I didn't count it. But that was the only wonky part of the promo. But again, I kind of feel like that's why they went to the box gimmick. Like, that's why I feel like it was they saw this video, they put this video together and said, man, Tommy needs something more than just a promo. We need to see this mystery guy. Let's bring a box out or something, because basically the Masked Superstar is in his hotel room, which makes it feel all the more real to me, as he essentially hires a hit on Tommy Rich, and Ray Stevens, the crippler himself, says he's as good as gone.
I thought I was watching, like Cannon or Mannix or Barnaby Jones.
Is Tommy going to reply to that VTR? He says the Masked Superstar, he's gone, but there's still 3 men left. And Tommy, he has his good friend right here in this box. And this guy in the box, well, he's no good too. He's low down. Why, he's exciting. And in fact, Tommy says that he's unpredictable. I wrote, lots of clues being dropped here.
Yeah, you can follow the breadcrumbs.
Just a little bit. Yeah, so Tommy Rich says he won't open the box until the Omni. Could you imagine this box walking to the ring at the Omni? I doubt it.
No, he'd fall over 10 times just trying to get to the ring. They'd have to put him on a little cart and wheel him out.
Reminds me of that old Japanese wrestling. I don't want to call it a promotion. I don't know if you ever saw this back in the infancy of the internet years. They had that show where this guy would come out and wrestle all these weird gimmicks, and one of them was Ken the Box. It was a guy that was made out of boxes. And that's what I feel like Tommy Rich is bringing to the Omni right now. Ken the Box coming to Georgia Championship Wrestling. But if anybody has the guts, they can come out here right now, Tommy says, and you can unbox him, if you will. Open the box. As Tommy once again, knock, knock, knock. And that box knocks right back.
Freddie Miller doing a good job inside.
Be there. Well, we talked about it on last week's episode of TV, and it gets a little closer here. We saw a VTR last week of the great Kabuki in action in Texas. This week, we go off now to his manager. The Playboy, Gary Hart, has arrived in Georgia.
I guess the one man who holds the greatest international reputation as a manager, a mentor, an instructor, you name it. This man does it, and does it so well. Obviously, he is extremely disliked by a lot of people, but one has to recognize his genius when it comes to getting the very most out of an athlete. You can see this in coaches. You can see it throughout any athlete's career. Many times it takes that other person to draw the very best out of him, or the very worst, whichever way you happen to want to look at it. Well, this gentleman to my right, Mr. Gary Hart, has that capability. And, of course, as we saw last week, the great Kabuki in action. I've had a lot of questions, Mr. Hart. First of all, welcome to Georgia and Georgia.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be back into Atlanta, Georgia.
I've had a lot of questions regarding the fact that Kabuki, of course, always wears the face paint. Would you care to relate to the people the reason for that?
Well, the basic reason that Kabuki has taken the name as Kabuki is because in Singapore he had a match with a man by the name of Tiger Jeet Singh, where the object of the match was that there was a bed of hot coals. I know that sounds ridiculous, and you would never see anything like that in America, but I'm talking about Asia and India, where life is a little harder. And the object of the match was to put the man's back across the hot coals for the 1, 2, 3, so he would carry the mark for life. Kabuki won the match, but the Hindu had some brothers with him, and they put Kabuki's face into the hot coals, and it burnt Kabuki's face around the eye area. That is why Kabuki's face is painted. One other important thing that I want everyone to remember. Kabuki, every time you see him, he is different. You know what Kabuki is. A lot of you people don't understand Kabuki, but in a few minutes, you are going to see the most, I would say, the greatest attraction in wrestling today. Nobody like him. We're not here for belts. We're not here for titles. We're here for money. And that's all I'd like to say right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart.
Very nice seeing you again.
All right, sir.
Now, there it was, Gary Hart explaining the reason for Kabuki's face paint, explaining the character. He says that Kabuki wrestled a guy by the name of Tiger Jeet Singh in India, where the object was to put a man's back across hot coals for the 1, 2, 3. He says, don't question it. Other parts of the world are just different, Jamie.
I bought it. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I still didn't care about Kabuki, but I bought it hook, line, and sinker. And you know, at the time, I'd never heard the name Tiger Jeet Singh. But
right. I love how you used a real wrestler, right? You know, just in case you might have heard the name.
Yeah, that was a nice pull out of nowhere by Gary Hart. Another guy, I understand he was great. People loved him. I never cared for Gary Hart. I mean, it wasn't heel heat. He got no heat for me.
Yeah.
He was just nothing. Even when he comes back in 89 and 88, he just never did anything for me.
You know, that's kind of funny you say that, and I can prove this, guys. You guys go back to my earliest wrestling memory grenade shows when I covered the 1989 NWA project. I spent ample weeks asking, what's the big deal with Gary Hart? And I understand he was a great booker at times for different promotions, and he was an adequate manager. He certainly could have done, you know, the talking for a guy like Kabuki if somebody needed somebody to just sell the character. But to me, I never understood it. It never got heat from me. It never made me want to hate someone, or it never brought intrigue listening to Gary Hart cut a promo. So I never got it either. I truly never did. And a lot of people put him on that manager Mount Rushmore, and I just never saw it ever. And again, you can go back 4 years ago to the infancy of the Grenade Show, and I was saying that all the way back then.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and he never got involved in anything. Now, years later, I understand after the plane crash and everything, he was injured enough where he just didn't want to take bumps anymore.
Right.
You know, I understand that, but it was just never dastardly enough. All he did was talk.
Yeah.
He wasn't like Captain Lou in there and, you know, taking the cheap shots and, you know, stuff like that. Or even Mephisto. I mean, Mephisto's not that great either, but
not at this stage anyway.
No, but at least Mephisto would get involved in the matches a little bit.
Yeah, so Gary Hart has arrived here in Georgia, guys, and he's telling the story about this matchup between Kabuki and Tiger Jeet Singh that supposedly took place in India, a match involving hot coals. Well, apparently Kabuki won the match. I wrote unlikely. For anybody who knows Tiger Jeet Singh, you'll get that. But apparently Jeet Singh, he had some Hindu brothers, says Gary Hart, alongside with him. So after Jeet Singh lost the match, the Hindu brothers, if you will, shoved Kabuki's face into the hot coals, thus scarring his face, explaining the face paint here, as Gary refers to Kabuki as the greatest attraction in wrestling today. They're not here for belts. They're not here for fame. It's all about the money.
Now, 40 plus years later, that Hindu brother line cracks me up.
Yeah, I had to pop.
I give Gary Hart props on that one.
The way he explained things sometimes, man. He had some Hindu brothers with him. It's like, yeah, that's Gary Hart for you. I will give him that.
Score one for Gary, because that might be the last one I give him.
Well, we go to the ring. Gary Hart in the corner of the Great Kabuki, making his TBS debut, Jamie, taking on a guy by the name of Tony Tosi, who appears to be Pacific Islander, maybe a Samoan of some sort. I'm not really sure here.
I think Gordon says it during the match, or it was Freddie in the introductions. Those mention he's from Samoa, so maybe he's a bloodline member that we don't know about.
I was going to say, I don't believe he's related to any of those Samoans, because Tosi's well put together, but, well, just wait and see. It is the debut, as I said, of the Great Kabuki, and the first thing he does is spit that green fog, the green mist spewed before the matchup by the Great Kabuki, who explodes, attacking Tosi, biting, chopping, kicking, gouging. Tosi, though, atrocious here. Maybe worse than Otis Sistrunk overall, guys, because every time Tosi delivers an offensive move, he actually sells the moves as if he was the one taking them. So if he throws a punch, he's selling a punch. He's all over the ring. I wrote, I don't know what the fuck is going on. He's just awful, stumbling and selling as he's on the offense. Gordon going to cover it up by saying that Tosi is simply confused by Kabuki to explain the weird flopping and staggering about. It was the weirdest. It was like a Matrix type selling, but the worst part was he wasn't getting hit. He was doing the hitting as he was selling. So very weird as Kabuki comes back with a roundhouse kick and then the trapezius hold of doom. Tosi, though, keeps selling moves that nobody is giving him. I have here in my notes, dear God, take this match home. And they do, Jamie. Finally, Tosi runs into a kabuki super kick, if you will, and the painted-faced warrior scores the win, 3 minutes and 18 seconds. As referee George Scott Jr. goes to raise the hand of kabuki, and probably the most cool thing of the entire match, Gary Hart goes in the ring and warns the referee, let me do it. He's a dangerous man. So trying to put over the craziness of this warrior, the great kabuki.
Yeah, George Scott Jr. still with us at this point. But yeah, a classy move by Gary Hart. Protect the referee in such a manner.
I'm protecting you. I'm going to let you see 21. Maybe we'll see an NWA. Hey, they got to revisit each other, years later. Who would have thought that? Gary Hart and George Scott Jr. will meet again in 1989 NWA. How about that? As, I had decent hopes for Tosi going into this. He was Samoan, right? And he was well put together. It looked good, honestly, physically. But he very well may be the worst overall job guy this entire year of 1981 in Georgia.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he might give Marion, what was the guy's name? Marion Crumley, that wrestled Superstar about 2 years before that. And it obviously went sideways because Superstar was not happy with him.
No, definitely not. I remember that. Absolutely. I've seen that before. I wrote here in my notes, not that Kabuki was great to start with, but this was absolutely your worst opponent for making a debut.
Probably. They should have thrown him in with maybe a Kenny Timms or something like that to start.
I would have given him anybody before Tony. Well, maybe not Otis Sistrunk, but that's another story. Wow, that would have been something. Otis Sistrunk versus Tony Tosi. Somebody booked that shit. I'd love to have seen that one. As we continue on with the program, Terry Gordy back out here with the baby bottle, promising to get Michael Hayes down and shove the bottle down his throat. As Freebird begins to play, Gordy going to leave the conversation, but the music stops as Michael Hayes arrives. Very weird. Sound guy screwing up there, but Michael Hayes out here right now, guys. We're going to listen to Mr. Purely Sexy.
Michael Hayes on his way, the original Freebird. And may I just say about Mr. Hayes that if you were intending to raise the ire of one Terry Gordy, you've done it now.
Well, it's like this. You see, look at these scars on this head that you already put on there. You see, you keep doing it, and I keep busting him, but that's getting a little bit old. What I want to do is humiliate you so bad.
Well, Sunday the 18th, you'll have
That's right, in the Omni. Now, did he make a challenge to me that he said that I can't beat him up bad enough to put that thing on by myself? Well, then your mama raised a fool, boy. Because I can beat you up just as bad as I want. Now, see, I got him just where I want. I humiliated him. I embarrassed him. And I want you to come at me as hard as you want. Because what we're going to do is just get down just as bad and as hard as we can, Gordon, because there's no way you're going to stick no bottle in my mouth. There is no way in hell you'll stick a bottle in my mouth. So you come with everything you got.
Here's a complete rundown.
Rockmart, Georgia.
Here's the rundown.
Attention wrestling fans, on the 18th, such stars as Otis Sistrunk and many more, including Big Jim Duggan against Steve-O, Midgets match, Little Tokyo against Cowboy Lang, George Wells against the Great Kabuki, and the grudge match of the year, Michael Hayes against Terry Gordy. Tag team event. It's now Wildfire Tommy Rich and a mystery partner against Tor Kamata, managed by the Great Mephisto and Ray Stevens. And for the World's Heavyweight Championship, Nature Boy Ric Flair champion against the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Get your tickets early for great seats. The Omni, Atlanta.
So there it is. Michael Hayes stating that he doesn't just want to hurt Gordy. He wants to humiliate him, Jamie. Michael Hayes considers it a challenge, and he's going to do it again.
It's a shame that there probably isn't any film of this particular matchup that they're going to have at the Omni.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to get out of this, and hopefully, something pops up, eventually down the line. But, you never say never, I guess, is what I learned after the last Battle of Atlanta made the light of day. But who knows? Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes, they have a one-on-one matchup scheduled. And we saw it in Augusta, I think it was, but it's going to really go down at the Omni, not too far away. And right now, hey, George Wells gets a singles match this week, taking on Jim Gallagher. And the bell sounds, and I wrote, holy fuck. George Wells straight away for a flying head scissors. I don't know what's going on with these job guys this week, Jamie, but Gallagher doesn't go with the head scissors. Instead, it becomes a head scissor driver. George Wells driving Gallagher skull first down into the mat. And dear God, I thought he might have broke his neck. But they get up and immediately take it home. Shoulder tackle going to end this one, 26 seconds.
Yeah, Gallagher's usually very serviceable and doesn't look too bad. He could have really got hurt in that, and I have no idea why he didn't go over like he was supposed to for the move, because unless George Wells just invented a new hold right there.
No, that was definitely not the case, although, you never truly know, but at the same time, at least George Wells had the wherewithal to just take it home, whether Gallagher said he was hurt or not. Maybe he saw something. I don't really know what the story was, but they got up and they went straight home in just 26 seconds, which is simply not the way Georgia TV is booked. You know what, though? We go off to a Ric Flair promo following that, and I'm sure the Nature Boy had no problem filling in that time, cutting another promo.
Yeah, obviously it was cut last week. He wasn't live in the studio this week. This is the first time he hasn't been live since like Labor Day. I believe he's been in studio every day since.
Yeah, he's been building up that world title match that he had where he won the belt. Well, at least coming for the belt at that time. Then he wins the belt, and he's been here ever since, every Saturday up until this point. But he does send in a pre-recorded VTR of the Nature Boy here, and it was from the TBS studios, so I'm assuming he cut it last week. He says you can add all of his challengers up, their talent combined, still falls short, just short, of the Nature Boy. Ric Flair has that rematch with the former champion Dusty Rhodes coming up October 18th in the Omni. And then from there, we hear from the other side. Dusty Rhodes, the Mac and Dream, baby, sending in a VTR as well. Not a whole lot here from Big Dust. I was a little disappointed in the promo. It wasn't, again, not a lot of substance, but the Dream is coming and coming back for his gold.
I never quite got why they couldn't have Dusty back in studio that day. He was needed to be in studio. I mean, they also did this with a Ric Flair Harley Race match later on. If you're not going to have the guys in studio, why are you going to have the match? In my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You needed at least one or both of the guys to be there.
Right. With Ric Flair being the world champion, he gets that bye with me. Obviously, he's probably somewhere defending the title in another territory. Makes sense. But Dusty Rhodes, you would think with the big, they're drawing the house, or they're supposed to be anyway. Obviously, Hayes and Gordy going to help along, but really the NWA World Title, the return match, if you will, between Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair is supposed to be selling the house there at the Omni, and neither man make it here to TV this week. Those promos are actually going to close up the first hour of Georgia TV as we go off to college football scoreboard, Jamie, with Bob Neal.
Yeah, I know.
So we come back from the football scoreboard to hour number 2 of Georgia TV this week. We hear from Tommy Rich once again with his box. Tommy says he's not worried about the bounty that's on his head. Georgia is his home, and he ain't going anywhere. Rich wants the superstar suspension lifted, and it can't happen soon enough. Tommy Rich daring the heels to come out and try and open the box.
They're not man enough to come out to open the box, but they should.
I would have loved to have seen somebody just call him out. You know what? Yeah, I am going to come out and open this box, and what are you going to do about it? Well, we weren't planning on that.
And then have Freddie Miller spill out of it.
Be there! I believe that it was Freddie Miller in there. That would have been, I just see Freddie doing that. Sure, guys, whatever you need.
Because they wouldn't take a chance putting Otis Sistrunk in the box.
God knows. That's for sure. As we continue on, Brian St. John getting a one-on-one match this week. Very odd booking of St. John lately. He hasn't really been on TV in forever for the most part, and now 2 weeks in a row. Last week he scored a win. Let's see what he does here, taking on Ken Woodby. St. John looks more disheveled by the week, Jamie. He looked like he was pretty put together at the beginning of the year, but as of late, I don't even recognize him anymore, but he's still solid in the ring. He could still go. As Gordon talks about Brian recently out with an ankle injury, but he is back, as we all can see. Woodby getting in some shots, but he runs into a knee right into the gut, and then a belly-to-belly suplex from St. John, going to get the win. 5 minutes and 44 seconds. Brian St. John getting a singles victory.
Yeah, St. John, you're talking about his appearance, it's kind of resembling a smaller Adrian Adonis.
Wow, that is amazing that you went there.
I mean,
that is exactly
80-81 Adrian Adonis.
Yes.
Not the 85, 86, 87.
It may be the hair and the highlights, if you will, that kind of lumps him in with Adonis here in the early 80s. But I totally agree with you. As I was watching him here, just a smaller version of Adrian Adonis body type. I mean, maybe not so much in the ring, but St. John, not bad in the ring.
No, not at all. I mean, he was in the year before with Stan Lane as the Florida Tag Champs. Mm-hmm. And then that dissolved, and they brought him back in, what was it, May or June? They brought St. John.
It feels like he's been here for a while. I really couldn't tell you.
Is that mid-card role?
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would have said earlier than that. So, but you very well could be right.
I wouldn't argue that he was there a little bit earlier, but to me, it just seems like May, June.
Okay.
I think he arrived. I mean, he's not in my top 10, so
sure.
It
not
doesn't
paying that
stay
close attention, right?
In the memory bank.
We closed out hour number 1. We heard from the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Here it is, another VTR right now from the brand new NWA World Champion. Here he is, Ric Flair.
You think it's easy? Traveling all around the world? Be considered one of the most beautiful human beings on the face of this earth? Knowing that every wrestler, every athlete in the world today would like to be in my place? I don't care if it's St. Louis. I don't care if it's the great city of Atlanta, the wrestling capital, Columbus, Ohio, Greensboro, Miami, Tampa. Makes no difference. Wherever Ric Flair is, things are going down. Because everybody wants to be sitting where the Nature Boy is. 8 long years, blood, sweat, yeah, and a few tears brought me this big gold trophy. And nobody in the wrestling world is going to take it from me very, very easily. Think about it. Ric Flair, a legend in his own time. Mr. Cool, that's what they call me. When I walk the streets, the ladies say, woo, he is some kind of fine. And he is our world champion. Now, Columbus, Ohio, I'm coming again. And you know what I'm talking about. And then, the 18th, Atlanta, Georgia. The big time. My kind of town, my kind of women, my kind of style. Limousines, bright lights, woo! Atlanta, Georgia, the 18th. The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, the son of a plumber. The man that I had to slap around and take this belt from because I wanted it. I wanted it more than he did, and I went out and got it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not, Ric Flair in all his magnificence is your world champion. And the 18th, the Omni, Big Dust, I don't care how bad you are. And the 18th, woo, you're going to belong to the Nature Boy all night long. Woo!
So again, Ric Flair cutting a recorded promo from the studio here at TBS. He says everybody wants to be sitting where the Nature Boy is. It took him 8 long years to be sitting at the top, and nobody is going to take that from him. It's once again another promo shilling his rematch with the American Dream at the Omni.
Yeah, nice touch. 8 long years that he waited. So it does show the struggle that he went through to get to the top. And as we know, he's not going to want to leave that top for the rest of his career.
Yeah, and now that he's here, he's not going to climb down, at least not willingly. As we continue on, guys, more promo. Terry Gordy out here, once again warning Michael Hayes, don't think you're going to humiliate me, Hayes, on nationwide TV and get away with it. Terry Gordy aptly puts it, he's going to beat Michael's brains out, boy.
And if I was Michael, I'd actually be a little worried. Gordy is just a loose cannon.
He's gotten a lot more serious in the last couple weeks, I'll tell you that.
Right, he's not playing around anymore.
No, and we go to the ring to watch Gordy in action, singles action against Jim Underhill. Underhill hanging in there to start. Gordy loved giving the preliminary guys offense. I think Gordy just liked to take a few bumps every match, but again, Underhill looking okay to start with, and some mat wrestling and even countering Terry Gordy. So Underhill may have been an amateur wrestler at some point. I really didn't expect that here against the larger Gordy, but the camera, it cuts to some fans for whatever reason, so we actually missed the finish. Gordy goes over in 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Gordon Solie says that Gordy, he simply caught Underhill with a hard right hand to score the win.
You know, Underhill, to me, the camera never got close enough, and I'm not sure where this guy was at this point in his career. Underhill kind of resembled, to me, a young Jacques Rougeau.
Really? Okay. Well, I'll have to go back and check that out just in case. You very well could be right. Who knows?
Yeah, I meant to do that, and I forgot about it.
No sweat, guys. That's what we do here, Jamie. We'll go back. We'll check that out just to verify. But it was really odd to finish. They don't show the finish. They never cut to the fans in the middle of a matchup, and they do it here, and that's when the finish happens. Boom. Hard right hand we learned from Terry Gordy. So he's going to score the win with just a punch. it would seem. So, Michael Hayes, we've got another offensive move by Gordy that you got to look out for heading into the big showdown. Right now, though, we hear another promo. Gordon Solie talking with the great Mephisto, standing by with Stevens Tor Kamata. Kamata, once again, he's wearing that jacket with that blacked out picture on the back of it. But the heels, they don't believe that there's anyone in that box. And that's when Gordon, he shuts Mephisto up. He points out that, someone was knocking back. Gordon Solie, the voice of common sense here.
Well, somebody has to take charge, and that's Gordon. He's going to tell him exactly how it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to imagine Mephisto simply wasn't watching the promos that Tommy Rich was cutting, because he made sure to knock on the box every time he was out there, and the box would knock back, just to show the fans that, there's somebody in here. Now, we never got to see how the box got to Gordon's area for the interviews. That would have been interesting in and of itself, but it is what it is. Mephisto stating, I don't think anybody's in that box.
Maybe it was Ole in the box, because earlier in the show, Ole actually walks through a shot.
Yeah, I don't think Ole's, even as the booker, I don't know that Ole's going to put himself in that position. But then again, he was the voice of the Black Scorpions, so you never know with Ole Anderson. As we continue on tag team action, hey, how about this team? Haven't seen them in a bit. Wrestling 2, teaming with his good buddy Steve-O, taking on Ken Timms and old Tomahawk Thompson here this week, as Tim's going to flub a backdrop by Wrestling 2 to start, but they recover quickly here. Babyface is going to control the match, work the leg of Tim's for a bit. Then it's old Tomahawk Thompson in to get schooled. Double thrust shot by Steve-O and a drop kick before tagging in 2 for that $1 million knee lift on Tomahawk. The masked man gets the win, 6 minutes and 39 seconds.
These guys, if you looked at this actually seriously, might be the most successful tag team in Georgia for the year of 1981. They've been teaming off and on since February.
Right. They really don't have anything for either guy, so they keep throwing them together in tag team matches, but it simply works. It's not the most exciting matches of all time, but they work together.
And they work house shows also.
Yes.
And most of the time they're going over on the house shows.
Yeah, it's also weird, and I could be wrong, but I feel like this is the half the dozenth time that Wrestling 2 has wrestled Tomahawk Thompson, so I'm not sure if that's some guy that he, quote-unquote, trained, took a few bucks from. I don't really know, but I feel like I've seen these two in the ring across from each other several times now.
Very possible. You want to take care of your own.
So we go back in time. We get a replay, that VTR of the masked superstar placing the bounty on the head of Tommy Rich. Don't forget that. And then to the ring for his buddies. Tag team action. Stevens Tor Kamata teaming up with the great Mephisto in their corner, taking on Rick Thor and good old Abe Jacobs here this week.
Yes.
And
I
Thor,
love Abe Jacobs.
I do too. Phenomenal talent. Goes back decades, literally, even in 1981. Goes back decades in the wrestling business. As Rick Thor, he gets the beatdown early on. Jacobs comes in, puts up a fight, but finds himself in the heel corner. Thor going to be tagged back in and then decimated. Kamata with a trifecta of power slams into the corner buckle before Ray Stevens in with a running power slam. Kamata finishing this one off with a big splash. Going to give the heels the win, 4 minutes and 3 seconds. Like you pointed out, Jamie, not the best, either one of them at this point in their career in singles action, but they work well together.
Very well. As a matter of fact, I've never seen Abe Jacobs, of course, in his prime. I don't think any of us really ever have, but I could just tell from that particular matchup there, I'll bet he was a badass in the day. Somebody you didn't want to mess with, and if you did something wrong, he'd shoot on you.
There's some black and white, go back to the 50s and whatnot of Abe Jacobs. You can go back and watch some of his matches, but he knew his place and his spot on the card. And surprisingly, he was kind of an undercard worker. He would put over the Gorgeous Georges, the Buddy Rogers guys, quite a bit. And he would put up a fight, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, he was never the guy, right? And but he had hell of a talent here. And I think I haven't done a lot of digging on Abe's career, but I do remember he does a match on tape, one of the old classic wrestling tape releases back in the 90s or whatever. I think it's against Gorgeous George. I could be wrong. And they refer to Abe as the Jewish heavyweight champion, and I just got to chuckle because he's the Jewish heavyweight champion from New Zealand wrestling in Georgia here, it would seem, in 1981.
Yeah, but to me, he just seemed like he was probably a badass at one time. And, of course, when we saw him earlier in the year on a couple TV, he just impressed me. So
isn't that a rule, like, if you're from New Zealand, you have to be some sort of a badass?
Was Tony Garea a badass?
Well, you got me there.
Tony Garea was a pretty boy.
Well, if you say so. Oh, that fucking tattoo and that dumbass haircut. Let's move on, guys.
Nabisco turned on him.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with Larry. I can't believe it took that long. As we continue on, we hear from the Wildfire Tommy Rich, but he's out here with Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk. And, of course, the box is along by... What do you think Otis was thinking as he's standing here next to a fucking guy inside a box? What the hell have I gotten into?
He's probably saying, I wish a quarterback or two on the other team was in a box. Or he'd like to put him in a box.
As I look at this team, though, Jamie, Tommy Rich, Michael Hayes, Otis Sistrunk, and a box. I wrote, what a War Games team that would have made, as Michael Hayes addressing a girl in the crowd that doesn't seem to like him. Michael Hayes biting back, kind of like Dusty Rhodes in later years when the fans would give him shit there in the crowd at the TBS studios.
That was legitimately great because they actually put the girl on camera giving him hell.
Yeah. And Michael fires right back. I don't need people like you anyway. Babyface Michael Hayes, everyone. As Tommy Rich promises to win the World Heavyweight title once again down the line from the Nature Boy Ric Flair or whomever may be the champion. But Tommy, he promised to beat the Superstar for the national title. He did that. He promised to win the World Heavyweight title. We saw him do that earlier this year, Jamie. And now he promises he's bringing the craziest man in wrestling in as his partner. Well, geez, that's a hell of a promise. I mean, you talk about, I'm going to win these titles. I won those, and now I'm promising you my partner's going to be the craziest man you'll ever see, and it's upcoming here at the Omni.
And me being a newer wrestling fan of Georgia at this point, I had no idea who was going to be in this box, and we will find out eventually.
And I was wondering initially, do they even know who it's going to be? But obviously, Tommy dropped a couple of hints earlier. We talked about those. We won't rehash them here because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who may have not caught on earlier on when we were talking about it. But it's very clear they know where they're going with this. Maybe not the craziest person in professional wrestling, but in real life, perhaps one of the most craziest professional wrestlers. That's for sure.
And great point there.
As we go back to the ring for the Georgia Tag Team Champions proper, it is Michael Hayes and Otis Sistrunk in a Australian rules 2-on-2 tag team match for the first time on TV. Just these two in the ring, teaming up against the team of Bruce Gallagher and Scott Dumas, as Otis, the man from Mars. Otis, my man, don't let me down. And he doesn't, Jamie, as he locks in a headlock from the wrong side. You're supposed to lock the headlock in from the left side. Otis doing it here from the right, as then he applies bear hugs on both of his opponents before delivering the old noggin knocker, Jess.
You know what? You just beat me to the line. I was going to use it eventually. Otis, my man.
Otis, my man.
From one of the greatest scenes in movie history.
So Otis comes in, he works the headlock from the wrong side, but he does deliver a double noggin knocker, so at least, he's got that in his repertoire. And then he delivers the weird tackle thing that we saw him do weeks ago to Snuka and Gordy. He's still doing it here. I thought it was a backdrop, but apparently it was some sort of a tackle in this instance, in this matchup, as he then locks in the headlock from the correct side this time. So he's learning before Michael Hayes finally tagging in to put us out of our misery, delivering the pile driver, giving the champions the win, 4 minutes and 2 seconds.
I'm speechless on what I just saw. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Ray.
You guys got to do yourselves a favor, go back and watch these Sistrunk matches while he's here in the territory, because, again, I'm not just saying it. These are something else. As we heard from Gary Hart earlier in the show, he's back out here to close the show. Going to talk with Gordon Solie again before a standby match. It appears that Kabuki may be working towards a matchup with Mr. Wrestling 2, because Gary Hart says they've been chasing the Masked Man through all of the territories. As he says Kabuki is going to get Wrestling 2. It's their only reason for being here. Funny, I thought he said just earlier in this episode he was here for the money. Now it's for Wrestling 2.
Well, there's a lot of money if you can knock.
Now you're defending Gary Hart. Now you're going too far. Now you're defending.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, I'm trying to put logic into pro wrestling. That's my fault.
You should know by now. We cannot do that. We'll be here forever. As we go on, one final match this week here on Regional Wrestling. Standby match. Going to see Great Kabuki with manager Gary Hart by his side, taking on Bob McKenzie. Gary Hart, he's going to get the nunchucks away from Kabuki before he uses them. Bummer. And the match begins. Kabuki even going to walk the ropes. Kind of. Maybe a step. And he comes down with a flying chop. McKenzie, though, managing to reverse an Irish whip, but runs into a savate kick in the corner. Kabuki with a single-arm flip takeover, and then a chop to the heart. Kind of like a heart punch, but instead it's a chop. And Kabuki going over here 3 minutes and 3 seconds as Gary Hart going to close the show by warning us Halloween is coming, and so is the Boogeyman. Great Kabuki here in Georgia.
That's about the only line I like from Gary Hart when he called him the Boogeyman.
The Boogeyman. But that wraps it up, guys, and no Omni card because it does not take place for another week, so we've got one more piece of TV to get through before we get to the next Omni show. But how about that? We know Terry Gordy wrestling Michael Hayes, and we know the NWA World Champion Ric Flair defending against the man he defeated for that title, Dusty Rhodes, plus Tommy Rich and this box man taking on the team of Tor Kamata, Ray Stevens, and so much more to look forward to.
Yeah, very solid card coming up in the Omni. I can't wait till we get through the next week of television and the Omni card.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it stands right now, the superstar, quote unquote, suspended. He's off to New Japan in reality, but he will be back soon. In the meantime, the bounty has been placed on Tommy Rich. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. And having Tommy Rich team with such an unpredictable, crazy partner, maybe you shouldn't trust a guy that's this crazy when there's a bounty at stake, but we'll see how that plays out, guys. And I'll leave it there for right now, Jamie. As that's going to wrap it up here this week, and I just want to point out before we close up shop, we are T-minus just a couple weeks away from the debut of one Rod Piper, going to be joining Gordon Soley as color commentator right here in Georgia.
And the world of professional wrestling will never, ever be the same. I don't want to go there. I love Jericho, but like I told you, right, I recorded another podcast before we started tonight. And if I do that, I'll be worthless for the other ship tomorrow when we're supposed to record.
Jammie Ward spreading it thin, going across all the different platforms right now, doing shows everywhere. He's become a famous celebrity here in the podcasting world, is Jammie Ward. Jamie, if you want to drop any thank yous or shout outs or whatnot, do it now, brother. We're going to wrap things up.
All right, I'll make it quick. I had a few people
make it good.
Ask me for what my top 10 in Georgia Championship Wrestling are. What wrestlers are on this list. So I'm going to make it quick. I'm not going into any reasoning. Most of you people already know what my reasonings would be. So number 10, George Wells. Number 9, Tommy Rich, because he's my mom's favorite wrestler. Number 8, the new impressive newcomer, Abe Jacobs.
All right.
Number 7, the badass Terry Gordy.
Okay.
Number 6, the most intellectual wrestler there is, the Masked Superstar.
Oh.
Number 5, Iron Mike Sharpe Jr. He's still around. We haven't lost him yet.
Okay.
At number 4, Grumpy Grandpa 2. He still isn't going to take crap off anybody. I can't wait for this Kabuki feud. At number 3, debuting on the list, even though the whole list is the debut.
Wow.
My main man, Otis Sistrunk, debuts at number 3.
Wow, getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Number 3. And now, number 2 is still Mr. Personality, Steve-O.
Yikes.
And still reigning at number 1, the fabulous Freebird, purely sexy, but not yet, Michael Hayes.
Yeah, I figured that would be your number 1, but you really shocked me. Steve-O, out of all that other talent, is still number 2. You know, I feel like this top 10 is going to change month to month moving forward because a lot of these guys aren't going to be here much longer. They've been here a while, and in Otis's case, he's just done.
But let me also thank everyone who has become new listeners to our podcast. As Ray mentioned, I was on with John McAdam and Steve Gennarelli on Stick to Wrestling, and I got a lot of good feedback from that show, and several people asked me for the link for regional wrestling, and I appreciate that, and I gave you the link, and the feedback has been they really enjoyed it, and they all plan on also listening to Roman and the UWF and Gene and Memphis, and they're also going to check out, Ray, your other WrestleCopia shows, you know, like with Bob Roop and Mr. Pororesu, Dan Giannetti.
Yeah.
Hopefully big things ahead for the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. And if you haven't heard enough of me, I'll be appearing on the other ship more or less irregular with those guys now. So check out Fridays or Sundays when the other ship is released. I'll probably be on with them. And then coming up very soon, I'll be on Carmelo's Wrestling Radio Reviewed. For those that remember Joel Goodhart, he started out on a radio show around 85 with her partner, Carmela Panfil, and her husband, Paul Panfil. And they were on a local Philadelphia radio station. They bounced around the dial a little bit, but I listened to them every weekend. The first time I ever went away on a wrestling trip was with their fan club, and I went to Memphis, and I got to meet Lawler and Jarrett, and we got behind the scenes at the Mid-South Coliseum. So Carmela reached out to me, and that's the show I recorded earlier on this week. So by the time this one comes out, that show will already be out. It'll be released on July 27th. So if you get a chance, please check out Carmela's Wrestling Radio Relive.
All right, very cool. Good stuff. Jammie Ward all over the place. Lots of good stuff. Obviously, we appreciate the likes of Stick to Wrestling, John McAdam over there at Arcadian Vanguard. I know it's been a while since you got to work with John. That was really cool that you went back over there, worked with John and Steve Generelli, who I would love to have on here at some point as well. We had John. He kicked off Regional Wrestle with me, the first 3 episodes covering 1977 in the WWWF. So hopefully we'll have John back on down the road as well when we finish up some of these other projects. As we continue on, we're coming to a close, but not quite yet. We've got a few months left here in the year of 1981, Georgia, Jamie. Then we'll figure out what we're doing next. But for now, guys, we're going to wrap things up. We're going to come back. We got another Omni card upon us on the next episode, and likely get through another 2 weeks of television as well, if time permits. So looking forward to that. And once again, thank you so much, Jammie Ward, for doing the show.
My pleasure, Ray. Anytime you want me, just call.
All right, guys, that'll do it here this week, but we shall return for more Georgia 81, Memphis 85, and UWF 86 very soon. I'm your host, Ray Russell. You can follow me on X at Rasslin Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Rasslin Grenade. And don't forget that $5 all access tier over at Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. And until next time, we'll be back soon with more regional wrestling, where we talk the territories.